Welcome, Raptor fans. We got a question. Every year there are big questions and then there are small questions. And I think there's a lot of small questions. Is Ochai legit? Is Grady a future star? Is Scotty Barnes the type of player you can build a franchise around? But then there are bigger questions. And the bigger questions are, what does it take to be a winner? And what the hell are the Raptors doing? Is this core what you're building with going forward? Now, I have woken up after a very long live last night. Our live went 5 hours and change last night, and 3 hours of it was clipped because I refused to let a really big win for the Toronto Raptors last night be sullied by talks of should the Raptors tank or should the Raptors not tank. So I figured let's not let's not duck the issue because looking at the comments today, it seems a lot of people have this question. Is this core good enough, Rob? Should the Raptors be tanking? And I think that every single thing that I think that sports can sometimes be a great metaphor for life, and it can be a great way to expand our minds into different knowledge, right? Cass saying, Rob, I'm sad. I didn't see it all, only saw the 2 hour version. Don't you worry, okay? Don't you worry. I got you covered. The basic gist of the 2 hour conversation that was clipped, in which I damn near lost my mind, just trying to understand the point, was simple. The Raptors should be tanking right now, right? Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. This is what we need. It will take the core to the next level. Scotty alone is not enough. RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickly is not leading you to a championship. You're not going to compete with the OKCs and the Denvers and the Boston Celtics of the world. You can't be competitive with this core. So I wanted to do a detailed live breakdown of all of it and to talk about just how good this team has been. Let's talk about it. First of all, what the hell are the Raptors doing? I mean, let's be real. Did you have the Toronto Raptors beating the Minnesota Timberwolves last night? Vegas didn't. The Raptors were 8.5 point underdogs going into last night. Did you have the Raptors beating the Indiana Pacers? Vegas didn't. The Raptors were 3.5 point underdogs. Did you have the Raptors going to overtime against the Boston Celtics and requiring a lucky travel violation not being called from Jason Tatum? Shoutouts Clutch Tatum. Nope. I think Vegas had the Raptors as 16 point underdogs in that game. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. The Toronto Raptors have beat the spread. They have, yeah, like to speak in gambling terms, they beat the spread. I don't support gambling, but Vegas is a good barometer for what the experts and the analytics and what the models show. So, what if the model is wrong? Is what I'm saying. What if the Toronto Raptors collectively have a group of 18 players that are all underrated? All of them. What if that's true? What if every single player on this team is just a little bit better and capable of a little bit more than you think they really are? Mel saying they have 3 wins. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. They have 4 wins. 4 wins. Learn to count. The Raptors are 4-12. That's not good. That's not good. 4-12 is not great. But do you remember that the Raptors led the league in strength of schedule earlier? So if I had told you the Raptors were perfectly healthy going into this year, and they didn't sustain 11 games missed from Scotty Barnes, and they didn't miss this many games from Emmanuel Quickly, and they didn't miss the start of the season from RJ Barrett, and they weren't missing Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown until the 16 game mark, and probably still a few more games left. I think you might have been like very surprised that they'd be 4-12. I think most of us would have assumed that they would have beat the Charlottes, maybe the Detroits. I don't think most of us had them knocking off the Sacramento Kings. What about the games that they haven't won? Overtime against the Boston Celtics, up 6, 1 minute down against the Denver Nuggets until Nikola Jokic smashes Scotty's face. What about those games? Do those not count? Does it matter that the Raptors beat the spread 7 straight games, that the Raptors have basically proved Vegas wrong all year? Is it just a big fluke? Is it just a series of coincidences like Slumdog Millionaire? Are the Raptors the Slumdog Millionaire of the NBA, where it's just like everything's just falling into their place? No, no. Now, look, when we walked into this season, I said one thing: you're going to find out who this team is, and you need to adjust once you do. And I believe that we are slowly finding out who this team is. And who this team is young, competitive, scrappy, together. And there's a lot of winners on this team. And there's a lot of surprises on this team. A lot of surprises on this team. I'm gonna mention 4 surprises for me, big surprises this year. Okay. And I'm not even gonna mention Scotty, RJ, and Yak. I'm not gonna mention the major, you know, let's say these slightly older, closer to their prime guys. What about Grady? Yeah, he's had a couple tough games. Yes. He's had some real negatives. But can we talk about the fact that Grady has really flashed some serious all-star upside here this year? What about Ochai? I think some of us, myself included, had written Ochai off coming into this season. I'm not proud to admit it, but it's true. I did not think that he was going to be a valuable role player. And that's what he's been. Shot's been a little bit off lately. Some of the touch around the rim hasn't been quite as smooth as it was earlier in the season, but we've seen enough here to say the Raptors really have something in Ochai Agbaji. What about Jonathan Mobo? 31st overall pick, bit of a wild card. 31st overall picks rarely work out, but especially in a weak draft. But I think there's something here. I really do. I think there is the makings of a permanent role player on a good team type of upside with him. And what about Jameson Battle? The afterthought, the guy who wasn't even on the roster to start training camp, but won out his spot, beating out Brandon Carlson, who's now in OKC. What about that guy? A guy who has become, as someone described yesterday, as a blankie for Darko Rajakovic, the guy that he goes to shore things up. That's a rookie out there. Those are all really young players. So does that change your calculus at all in terms of who the Toronto Raptors are? I think it does to some extent. But what the hell are they doing? Shouldn't they be tanking right now? Shouldn't they be trying to go for Cooper Flag? Shouldn't they be trying to go for Ace Bailey? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Over the last 3 games, the Toronto Raptors have taken the Boston Celtics to overtime, aforementioned. They have beat the Indiana Pacers without Scotty Barnes, without Emmanuel Quickley, without Bruce Brown, without Kelly Olynyk, without Jacoby Walter. And last night, they took a pretty good team from the West, the Minnesota Timberwolves, that most people think are they're title contenders or soft title contenders, and they beat the shit out of them in the 4th quarter. Scotty Barnes turned up that pressure in the 5 minutes to go in the game, and Scotty Barnes turned up the pressure, and they couldn't stop him. And he is nowhere close to 100% right now. Believe me, this guy's going to get better. So it's been good. Even though you're 2-1 over the last 3 games and winners of 2 straight, you could easily knock out the Boston Celtics. Again, it took free throws. It took referees. It took a travel not being called. How many things went wrong for the Toronto Raptors in that game, and they were still in it? They fought. And by the way, that Boston Celtics game was without Emmanuel Quickley. It was without Emmanuel Quickley. And the Boston Celtics were relatively healthy. I think it's worth noting, right? Okay. Is this We the North Part 2? Now, we all remember that Masai Ujiri tried to pull the plug on the initial We the North as they got off to a 6-12 start. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the record was 6-12. The Raptors are 4-12 right now. It's not that far off. So Mel saying no Drew Holiday or Porzingis. Cool. No Scotty Barnes, no Kelly Olynyk, no Bruce Brown, no Emmanuel Quickley. Does that balance out somewhat? Is Scotty Barnes better than Drew Holiday and Porzingis? Yes, he is. So I think the Raptors were missing more than the Celtics that day. And I don't think the Raptors need to be better than the Celtics right now for us to support this team. So that's two L's for two L's for Mel. Let's see how many L's Mel can go for today. So we the North really started with a camaraderie between two players that a lot of people had written off in the league. DeMar DeRozan was a bit of an afterthought at that point. He was not a potential. If I had told you in 2014, 2013, 2013, 2014 that DeMar DeRozan was going to score damn near 30,000 points, I think you would call me crazy. If I told you Kyle Lowry was a future Hall of Famer, you'd say I was capping. But things changed for the Raptors in 2014 as that team banded together and they got a taste of success in the playoffs. And once they got that taste of success, they never missed the playoffs again. And they built on it every year. Now, you want to credit the championship. I'll credit the entire process. The joy that we got, the disappointment even, of watching this team year over year compete is not something that I'm just willing to wash away as LeBronto. Okay. Yes, it sucked to get beat in the second round by the Cavs. Yes, it sucked to lose in the Eastern Conference to the Cavs. Yes, it sucked to lose to Brooklyn on that final shot, which of Kyle Lowry's that got blocked by Paul Pierce. Yes, it sucked to get swept by the Washington Wizards. Believe me, I remember all those losses. I remember all of them. But isn't it some part of the process that losing created the winning? Or do we divorce the losing from the winning and we partition it off and say, well, that's the losing part. Let's not think about that, but that's the winning part. If you're a casual, you probably think that the Raptors' only successful year was 2019. It's just not true. I think the Raptors have had many successful years. I think 2000 was a successful year. I think 99 was a successful year. I think 2001 was a successful year. I think 2002 was a relatively successful year. I think 2006, 2007 was a successful year. I think 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2021 were all successful years. Over the last 20 years, I'd say the Raptors have had more success than failure. Way more. So why are people rooting for failure? Right? I think it's a question worth asking. Ask yourself a really honest question. Not with the benefit of hindsight. Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick. Does this core not inspire more confidence than Terrence Ross, Jonas Valanciunas, Kyle Lowry, and DeMar DeRozan? Without the benefit of hindsight, which core would you rather have? Be honest with yourself. Then be honest with me. Now, make this a little bit bigger. These are the standings in the East. Okay, hang on one second. These are Eastern Conference standings. And as you see, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who the Raptors face next, are 16-1. Boston Celtics 12-3 that the Raptors nearly beat. The New York Knicks have a grasp of number 3. Number 4, Orlando Magic, winners last night in Los Angeles on the road, 10-7 without Paolo Banchero. They are looking good. Beyond those 4 teams, there is not a single team in the East that scares me, even a little bit. The East is so top heavy. Can Toronto catch Miami? A team that is one game under 500. Yes, they can. Can Toronto catch Atlanta? A team that is 2 games under 500. Or Detroit, a team that they are going to face in 4 days that is 3 games under 500. What about the Nets, the Hornets, the Pacers, the Bucks, the Bulls? Those are the teams ahead of you. You can beat those teams. You can beat those teams, not only in a play-in setting, not only in a playoff setting, not in a 7-game series. You can beat them in the regular season, and you can literally climb to 5. Now, some people don't want that because they want to tank. And I understand you, but I'm trying to tell you, there's got to be some sort of method to this. Now, I talked about the math, and the math is going to dictate, and there's going to be a pivot point for the Raptors. So let's look at the Raptors games until the new year. These are all the games that the Raptors are going to play until the new year. Let me just remove this banner for a second so you can see the bottom. Cleveland, Detroit, New Orleans, Miami, Indiana, OKC, Dallas, New York, Brooklyn, Houston, New York, Memphis, Atlanta, Boston. Okay, we talked about the first 25 for the Raptors. There's a lot of road games here, and then there's a very lengthy homestand. Okay, what do the Raptors have to do to save their season? Let's talk about it. Because really, January 1st will be a huge pivot point for the Raptors. Now, the Raptors are 4 and 16, which means they've played 16 games. This makes it 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. That's 31. 31. What would be a record that you would want after 31 games that would move you away from pulling the plug on this team? 31, okay. Is 12 wins enough? And can the Raptors get to 12 wins? What about 13 wins? Let's set 13 wins as a benchmark, and let's try to see if we can get 9 wins here. Can we find 9 wins here? What are the 9 wins that you want? At Detroit, at New Orleans. I think those are winnable games that you must get. That's 2. Versus Miami. So on the home and home, I think you got to take care of Miami at home. That's 3. Indiana at home, that's 4. One of OKC, Dallas, or New York. You got to get one of those. That's 5. Brooklyn, that's 6. I don't think you're beating Houston. I'll be honest. I don't think you're beating Houston. Split on the road against New York and Memphis. Maybe beat Memphis or beat New York. I'm not sure which of those teams you're going to beat. Maybe you'll beat neither, but we're still at 6. And then you got Atlanta and Boston. So I'm going to say realistically and very optimistically, the Raptors get 7 wins. 7 wins here. Okay. 7 wins. Okay, hold on. Let me make myself small here. 7 wins. 7 wins after 31 games puts you at 11 and 20. The schedule eases up so much from there. So at 11 and 20, with over 37% of your season done, I think the math is correct on that. Well, at least over 35% of your season done. You would have to mount a major comeback in after the new year, which means at some point from the baseline of 11 and 20, you would have to get to 15 wins before you get to 30 losses. If you get to 15 wins before you get to like 28 losses, I would say your season is savable. If it's not, that's the trade deadline, and that's when you start to part out pieces. So everyone panicking about this, don't you worry. The Raptors have a super hard road ahead. This is a super hard road. Believe me, I was being very optimistic. This is a team that has not won a single game on the road, and this is a team that has a lot of road games left. This is also a team that could potentially be facing some very desperate teams later on. But this is also a team that has a lot of games against some tanking teams later as well. Now, it's worth noting that there's a lot of flexibility, and we're going to talk about that as well. But let's bring on to the main thing. Let's talk about something else. Is this team good enough to win a championship? Is this team undrafted, undersized guard, castaway, point guard who was on his, 5th team before he got to Detroit, head case Rasheed Wallace, who was a very talented player, but, let's be real. Tayshaun Prince, who's not in this picture, who was, if I'm not mistaken, a 22nd overall pick. Rip Hamilton, who was traded for Jerry Stackhouse from Washington Wizards. You know what all of these guys have in common? It's ironic that Tayshaun Prince is not in this picture, but do you know what these 4 players have in common? Let me know in the comments if you know what these 4 players have in common. SP saying heart. Sure, that's one thing. What else? What else do they have in common? Defense. Daniel saying none are all NBA. Winner. None of them were drafted by the Detroit Pistons. None of them. Chauncey Billups was drafted by the Boston Celtics and then was eventually shuttled off to the Raptors, and then he had a cup of tea somewhere else. Rasheed Wallace was drafted by the Washington Bullets before being moved off to the Portland Trailblazers, then being, I think he had a day or two in Atlanta, and then he ended up in Detroit. Rip Hamilton, if I'm not mistaken, started his career in Washington. Somewhere else? Or Ben Wallace started his career in Orlando. So it's worth noting that these were not, like, none of these guys were ever considered a franchise superstar or a savior. But you're like, okay, Rob, come on. That's the only exception to the rule, right? Well, what about these two? I mean, Paul Pierce was, I believe, a ninth overall pick, if I'm not mistaken. Paul Pierce was ninth. KG was fifth. Ray Allen. KG was drafted by the Minnesota Timberwolves. He did not win a championship for the Minnesota Timberwolves ever. He didn't make a finals with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He won that championship with Boston, right? Rajon Rondo was the guy who was drafted by Boston. Paul Pierce was the guy drafted by Boston. Kendrick Perkins was the guy drafted by Boston. Ray Allen was not drafted by Boston. He spent time in Milwaukee. He spent time in Seattle before he got to Boston. He became a part of a championship core. But how did they get these guys? Well, KG was traded for what? KG was traded for Al Jefferson. Main piece was Al Jefferson. Al Jefferson was drafted by the Boston Celtics. What about Ray Allen, Rob? Well, Ray Allen was traded largely for the 5th overall pick in that year's draft, which was Jeff Green, to the Seattle Supersonics. Seattle wanted to rebuild. Boston wanted to contend. So, I mean, you think about the Raptors. The Raptors are no strangers to trading lottery picks. Historically, they traded Marcus Camby after a really, really good couple years in Toronto. They traded him away to get Charles Oakley. They traded away a 5th overall pick, which became Jonathan Bender, to the Indiana Pacers to get Antonio Davis. So, I mean, trades, once you have the foundational superstar, which, Boston sort of did, Detroit sort of did. Who was Detroit's foundational piece? Ben Wallace. Sure. Ben Wallace was the anchor. Chauncey was the heart. Rip was the soul. Rasheed was the spunk. I don't know what you want to call it. But once you have that piece, the engine that gets you through, who was the Raptors engine? Kyle Lowry. It wasn't Kawhi Leonard. Don't lie. Right? So that's my point. Once you get that engine, now it's just about filling out the pieces. Right? These are not the only ways the teams have won championships. Those are obviously two very good defensive teams led by very veteran-laden rosters. But what about this one? Everyone talks about how the Spurs tanked for David Robinson or the Spurs tanked for Tim Duncan, but they did not tank for the core that won them their 2014 championship. They did not tank for Tony Parker. They did not tank for Manu Ginobili. They did not tank for Kawhi Leonard. They did not tank for Boris Diaw. They did not tank for a lot of those pieces that helped them win a championship. Multiple championships across 2 decades. How did they continue to do it? Organizational culture, stability, bringing out the best in players. Now, last night in the live, there is a nugget that I sort of buried with the edit, which was that there's 1,000 versions of Grady. There's 1,000 versions of RJ. There's 1,000 versions of Jacoby. There's 1,000 versions of Ulrich. There's 1,000 versions of me and 1,000 versions of you. And it's the things that we do and the environment that we're in on a day-to-day basis that's going to either determine who we become of those 1,000 outcomes. And you can never really guarantee that you'll become the best version of those 1,000 outcomes, but you can try to build a situation and do the things that will at least land you in the 98th percentile outcome. You just want to be among the upper echelon of outcomes. Maybe there's a world in which Grady becomes the greatest shooter in NBA history. You don't need that world to come true. There's a version of Grady where he's out of the league in 4 years because he just didn't develop and he was buried on the bench and he didn't get the opportunity and everybody just kind of looked him off. You don't want that outcome either. But there's a version of it in which he becomes a 6-time All-Star, and that's probably like the 98th percentile outcome for Grady Dick, right? It's the same thing with Scotty, right? There's a version in which he becomes like one of the top 10 players of all time. There's maybe another version where he becomes one of the top 50 players of all time. And then there's another version in which he becomes a 3-time All-Star and kind of like fizzles off in his late 20s to becoming like a third option Aaron Gordon type. You don't want that outcome. You certainly don't. So between his trainer, him, the coaching staff, development staff, Masai Ujiri, everybody, you work to get to the 98th percentile outcome. You do the work. And maybe the 98th percentile outcome is a Hall of Fame career. First ballot Hall of Famer, 12-time NBA, 12-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA, 2-time champion. Maybe that's the 98th percentile outcome. Maybe that's the 99th percentile outcome. Maybe I'm selling myself a little bit. My point is, when Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker were drafted, nobody in the world thought either of them would be starters on a championship team. They started and played starter level minutes on 3 championship teams. 4 championship teams. They played major rotation. Hold on. No, that's not entirely true. They both played starter level minutes for at least 3 championship teams. I'll have to check my stats on that. When Kawhi Leonard was traded for George Hill, trust me, the Indiana Pacers did not know they were trading a future finals, 2 times finals MVP. They did not know that. So it takes a little bit of imagination. But trust me, Tayshaun Prince was never supposed to be the guy who could shut down T-Mac. If that's who people thought him to be at the draft when he was coming out of Kentucky, I'm pretty sure he would have gone top 10. He didn't go top 10. We got to stop thinking in absolutes. Got to tank for Cooper Flag. You got to think about it in odds. Got to win a championship. Nope. Got to think of it in odds. Scotty's got to become an all-star, all-NBA, superstar. Odds. Everything's got to get back to the odds. You know who thinks about everything in absolutes? Idiots. I'm just be real with you. I'm sorry if that comes off a little bit blunt. Idiots think in absolutes. Okay. I'm sorry if you are the type of person who picks up a lottery ticket and thinks you're going to become a millionaire. No. Just because Joe down the street won $10,000 on the lottery does not mean that buying a scratchy lottery, the overwhelming odds are that people who play the lottery lose money. If you play the lottery long enough, you will lose money. If you gamble long enough, you will lose money. Those are the odds. Okay? That's the absolutes, though. And when you think in terms of absolutes, like I'm going to get rich by playing the lottery or gambling or whatever, you really are missing the point that it's always going to come down to the odds. No, you're not winning the lottery. You have a 0.000000001% chance of winning the lottery. And if you're cool with that, you're cool with that. So what about when it comes to basketball? Forget lottery, forget government housing, forget my traumatic childhood. What do we actually have to think about? You can't think about winning championships. You could think about, we want to give ourselves a 20% chance to win a championship for a 6-year window. You can't think about getting Cooper Flag. You have to think about it as the NBA's rule changes around the draft have made it so that we can never, ever have even a 15% chance of getting Cooper Flag. There's no team in this league. You can go out and win 0 games. Okay, the Raptors have 4 wins. Okay, let's say they go, to some of you, this might sound appetizing. Let's say they go 78-4. Sorry, 4-78. 4-78 for the rest of the season. They lose every single game. They shut down Scotty, RJ, Emmanuel quickly, and they play, bring back Jamias Ramsey and Ober Shamshay at starting center, and then you lose every single game this year. No one will ever beat you. You will never crack 80 points. Cool. You're the worst team in NBA history. Congratulations. How much have you sullied the brand? Cool. You've sullied the brand. You've sullied, your reputation with the fans. It's been an embarrassment. Your team has identified with this losing. It's disgusting, but no one is beating you. You are historic levels bad, just like the Pistons were last year. Historic levels bad. Congratulations, you have earned a 14% chance at Cooper Flag. 14%. Now, okay, apart from Cooper Flag, which is the top prize in this draft, just like Wemby was the top prize 2 years ago, just like Zion was the top prize 6 years ago, just like Blake Griffin and Tim Duncan and all these guys that maybe some people got really excited about. Is Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper or VJ Edgecombe or Nolan Traore or Yegor Demin, are these guys worth losing an entire season over? Some of you think yes. So I'm gonna deal with the math on that. There's no chance that the Raptors, without fixing this team, like fixing the odds, like basically just resting all their guys and not playing. There's no way that a healthy version of the Raptors, with the way that they play, can finish any worse than 7th in the rankings. They can try to lose every single game, and I guarantee you they'll have like the 7th best record or the 7th worst record at the end of the year. At which point, what are the odds? That's what you need to calculate. At 7th, you can move down to 8th, 9th. Sure, you have the potential to move up to 1st, 2nd, 3rd. I think some of y'all just want a good lottery ticket. But you're not thinking of it in terms of what it is, which is we have a 3% chance or a 6% chance or 8% chance at Cooper Flag. But we also have so I guess what I'm trying to say is what is the gap of outcomes? What the gap of outcomes is huge. Don't get me wrong. Cooper Flag versus the 9th overall pick in this year's draft is enormous. But don't think of it as Cooper Flag versus the 9th overall pick. Think of it as 14% versus 2% or 14% versus 7%. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't think of it in absolutes. Oh, we lost Cooper Flag. No, you didn't lose Cooper Flag. You lost a 6% chance to get Cooper Flag and you traded it for a 3% chance to get Cooper Flag. When you think of it in terms of odds versus absolutes, you will change your mind very easily. There's another thing that you need to think about, which is the odds don't only apply to draft. They also apply to championships. Every single year, there's a certain percentage chance. It's like a pie, okay? There's 1%, which is the outlier, which is the field, okay? It's like literally 24 teams. And then the other 99% of the championship odds are usually split between 5 or 6 teams. And what you want to do is not win a championship. What you want to do is have as large a piece of that pie for as long a period of time as humanly possible. The goal is not championships. I'll repeat that again. The goal is not championships. The goal is to have as much of the pie for as many years as possible. Which is to say this. 2 teams, Team A, Team B. Team A has a 25% chance to win the championship for 10 years straight. Okay. They never win a championship. Every year they strike unlucky. Injuries, missed shots, buzzer beaters, etc. 10 years, 25% odds. Every single year they are either the title favorite or the second title favorite, and they never win. Team B has a 1% chance for 1 year and wins it. Team B, for most people, is considered the successful team, and Team A is considered the failure. I consider Team A the successful team, and I consider Team B the fluke. That's what I'm trying to tell y'all. Okay? I don't consider the Sacramento Kings in the early 2000s a failure. I consider it a monumental success that did not result in a championship. I don't consider what the Sixers did getting to the finals 2001 with Larry Brown and Allen Iverson a monumental failure. I certainly don't consider the Raptors with Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady a failure. I consider it a great thought and a great idea that just didn't quite work out, right? What I do consider a failure is building a fake, you know, hopeless team, maxing out everything, compromising your entire, future to go all in on a core that does not work. That is the only reason I was super frustrated with the 2022 Raptors when they traded for Jakob Poeltl. Like, that's the only reason. 2022, 2023, when we did that. Like, that was the only reason, because I didn't believe that Pascal, Fred, Scotty, and OG was going to win a championship. I didn't believe that Jakob was on the timeline. I thought they're going to have to refresh this in a couple of years, and 7 foot center making $20 million not going to make a lot of sense. I'm right. Okay. The eighth overall pick and the 2 second round picks that you lost for Jakob Poeltl definitely are worth more than Jakob Poeltl. And we don't know if the Raptors would have drafted Grady at sixth, if they had the sixth overall pick, which is probably the outcome that they would have ended up with. We don't know that. So we don't know that the Raptors necessarily picked anyone different than they would have picked all along. But maybe they would have picked Bilal Coulibaly. Maybe you feel differently about this core. Maybe they would have picked Derek Lively. Maybe they would have picked Cason Wallace. We don't know who they would have picked. We don't know, right? So I'm just trying to say, Recruiter Dude saying, thank you for the super chat, by the way. I've been saying trade the pick from day one. The losing streak didn't phase me because the positive energy this group of guys continues to exude as pure rapture. Thank you. Yeah. I'm kind of glad they didn't trade the pick, though. You'll remember I was on the trade the pick like version of reality as well. Now that the Raptors have massively underperformed, well, I don't say massively underperformed. Now after the last two games, they're kind of overperforming relative to expectations. But I'm perfectly cool keeping the 2025 pick. But I'm aware that what you're saying is true as well. That they would have maximized absolute value had they traded it like 4 games ago, and just got some immediate help or something. I think they just have to wait for teams to get a little bit more desperate. And it's absolutely possible, based on the schedule that the Raptors have, that the Raptors could lose like the next 4 games. And suddenly that pick is really valuable. It's like you're 4-16. Once you get to 4-16, like at the 20-game mark, if you have a 20% win percentage, that's pretty nuts, right? Like, I think a lot of people will be looking at you like, oh shit, that's a terrible team. And I think all your future draft picks get a lot more valuable. Personally, I'm probably more in the line of let's trade 2028, 2030, as opposed to let's trade 2025. I agree with the vast majority of Raptor fans that the Raptors need one more talented piece. I just disagree that that piece can't be found outside of the top 5. But thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. I'm going to keep that up for a little bit. Now, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Championships are built on competitive failures over time. Okay. So the view of this is that the average NBA champion wins 55 games per year for 3 years before breaking through. The thing that I said about trying to get as large a piece of the pie for as long a time as you can get it is true. Most teams don't win on the first crack. The teams that do are usually massive outliers. The Boston Celtics 2008 championship was won on a first try. Yes. They were a terrible team the year before. They got Kevin Garnett. It changed very quickly. That is an outlier. That is an outlier among outliers. Throwing together a whole bunch of superstars does not guarantee a championship, as the Brooklyn Nets found out, as the LA Clippers found out, as the Phoenix Suns are finding out. Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, no championships, no finals, right? Which Phoenix team did go to the finals, though? Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. That team went to the finals, right? You need a little bit of luck to break your way, but you also need those scars, because the playoffs are very valuable. The play-in is very valuable. These competitive failures not only build you as a player, they give you experience, but they change your self-identity of who you think you are. They change your aspirations. They may dictate, maybe even 5%, make you work 5% harder because you're chasing something that's very meaningful to you. We're looking at everything that's happening in Philadelphia, and I think Philadelphia is a great example of not a championship culture and not a team that is necessarily going anywhere very fast. And you look at what came out about Joel Embiid Nick Nurse, and Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey questioning Joel Embiid's commitment to the team, asking, why don't you come out? Why aren't you on time for things? Nick Nurse blasting his team for not having toughness. He mentioned that this is a team that crumbles when things don't go their way. They're getting out toughed. These are not things that I would ever say about the Toronto Raptors this year. They are not getting out toughed. They are the more physical team every single night. They are generally speaking pretty disciplined. They just lack talent. So whoever you draft next year, the 13th pick, the 12th pick, the 10th pick, the 15th pick, the 18th pick, the 6th pick, the 5th pick, or the first pick, that player is going to come in. Okay. Sorry at the beach, cheap drunk. Listen later. Bro, drunk at 2 p.m., living your best life. I like it. Friday. That's good. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, lost my train of thought. I'm like, I'm realizing you're not in Canada because my first thought was, who the hell is on a beach in Toronto on November 22nd? But then I realized you're not messaging from Toronto, so appreciate you. Whoever comes into this culture, whoever comes onto this team, is going to learn how to work from Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes. Jacoby Walter is a 19-year-old kid. Ulrich Chamche is a 18-year-old kid. Those are kids. Those players, were they in Division One basketball right now, would definitely be mocked as first rounders that you might be salivating at. You know that guy Ulrich Chamche who just blocked 6 shots in the G League? Yeah, just shudder to think what he would do against low-level Division One competition in a weaker conference. You might be licking your chops. You might be saying, "Man, that African prospect playing for Texas or playing for BYU or playing for Gonzaga is really freaking good. We should draft him 20th overall." But you already have him on your roster and you don't value him. The grass is not always greener on the other side. Jacoby Walter, again, I've mentioned it 100 times. I'll mention it again. This is a really talented kid, and I believe he has a very, very bright future, and he does a very valuable thing in the NBA, which is movement shooting with two-way potential. He's got long arms, 6'10 wingspan, 6'5, 6'10 wingspan. Who are you to tell me that Jacoby Walter cannot be a top 5 player from his draft class? You can say the odds are against him, but what did I say? Odds and absolutes, right? Jacoby Walter has a chance to be a top 5 player from his draft class. Ulrich has a chance to be a top 5 player from his draft class. If they both become top 5 players of their draft class, then what does it matter that they were the 19th and 57th pick? If they would go 4th and 5th in a redraft 5 years from now, who cares if they were the 19th and 57th pick? That's what I'm trying to say. Have some imagination with it. Does it matter to me that Scotty went 4th and Cade went 1st? No, because I would take Scotty over Cade 100 times again. I would have taken, it doesn't matter where these guys go. So it's the same thing. If you draft Dylan Harper with the 3rd pick, you're probably really excited, right? You're like, oh my God. Or maybe you're not excited because you probably wanted Jaeger Demon. Let's say you get the 4th pick and you draft Dylan Harper. Let's play that out. You draft Dylan Harper with the 4th pick. Nolan Traore, due to being overseas and having some issues, slips to 11, right? What if Nolan Traore becomes a better player than Dylan Harper? If VJ Edgecombe struggles in his second half of the season at at Baylor, not BYU, at Baylor, what if VJ Edgecombe falls to 14th? Is that possible? Now you drafted Dylan Harper at 4th and you're excited, but some team out there drafted 2 better players at 11 and 14. You get to be excited for literally 1 year, and then you get to regret it for the rest of your fucking life because the player that you picked would have been off the board had you had the pick that was later, and you might have made a different decision, right? You can't think in absolutes. You can't say the 4th player is going to be better than the 5th player is going to be better than the 8th player. You just have to think, if the world is working in an ideal and optimized way, the 4th pick has better odds of being great than the 5th pick. And the 5th pick has better odds of being great than the 56th pick. But odds are meant to be broken. Maybe that's a little bit of hopeful speech, but anyway, there are 100 ways to build a team. The tank talk is lazy. Why do people I wanna get to the bottom of this because last night we had a conversation with Is Jace, and it got really frustrating for me, and I'm sorry to anybody who listened to it. I went into, a year ago Rob mode, like, I was just straight up like, "Shut up," like, "I don't wanna listen to this anymore," like, "I'm sick of this," and I had a lot of difficulty understanding his point. Not running away from that, people saw it live, whatever, clipped it out, but can't erase it. It was on the internet, boom, okay? I was not pleased to have that conversation, number 1 because I have a very different view of this team than the average person. I believe Scotty Barnes is a championship number one. You might not, and that's cool. We'll see who's right. But I do believe, again, forget championships. Let's just forget championships. Can Scotty Barnes be the best player on a team that has a 25% chance to win a championship? Let's think in terms of odds. Yes. Summer Low saying the problem with that caller is that he kept cutting you off and you couldn't finish a sentence. Yeah, I don't deal well with like conversations that don't flow well. Like I start to really lose it. So I gotta get better at that. That was on me. Yeah. Nadim saying a lot of big ifs, but if Ulrich pans out, I don't think we need anyone in the upcoming draft. Cool. And again, I think I appreciate where you're coming from, but that's another absolute, right? Well, that has been left. But that was funny, but that has been left on the live. You can definitely check that out. There are 100 different ways to build a team, right? Trades, draft, free agency, development. But where does this tank talk come from? Where does this I want my team to be bad and I want to cry every time they're not bad? Where does this come from? I want to know. Is this a Toronto only thing? Certainly not. I think it comes from a logical conclusion that is based on certain variables or certain factors. So I'm a big believer in sentential logic, and I don't think a lot of people really understand sentential logic. So let me try to lay out a sentential logic equation, right? Try this out. I believe that the Toronto Raptors do not have enough talent currently on their team if I believe if I believe the Toronto Raptors do not have current enough talent on their team right now to contend. And and I also believe that that talent cannot blossom into the type of talent that can win a championship. Then I believe the Toronto Raptors need to be bad this year so they can have a chance at drafting that type of talent. I believe at least 65 to 80% of Raptor fans fall in that bucket where they're either okay or terrified about the losses, but they're not they're okay or lukewarm on the wins, but they're not actively happy about the wins because deep down they're not really sure this team, as currently constructed with RJ, Scotty, Emmanuel Quickly, Grady Dick, Ulrich, all the young players, they don't believe that this team has what it takes to win a championship. But a championship is just 16 wins in the playoffs. We talk about championships like they're mythical. They're not. It's actually quite simple. Let me explain it to you from my Asperger's brain. The team that wins 16 playoff games wins a championship. It's not. There's nothing. There's nothing else to it. You just have to win 16. You have to win 16 in every single series. You have to win four before you win three. Before you lose. Wait. You have to win four before you lose four. That's it. That's all it is. It's not there's not like you gotta hit buzzer beaters, you gotta, have the best player in the league. No, you can have the best player in the league and get swept. 100%. The Denver Nuggets could get swept this year in the playoffs. I'm not kidding. Jokic or no Jokic, doesn't matter. They got beat by the same team that you beat last night. They have the best player in the world. So to the person saying Scotty's not gonna be Jokic, cool. Jokic lost in the playoffs last year. In fact, let's talk about the monumental failure that Nikola Jokic is. Only one championship, best player in the world for the last 5 years, only one championship. That's my point. right? The goal, what my conversation about odds versus absolutes, it's important. You also have to think of players as assets, not absolutes, right? Scotty Barnes is, I, I don't know, try to think. I don't want to make it crude and talk about it like in dollars, but think of it like dollars, right? If getting to a 25% chance to win a championship is just a matter of having $1,000 in the bank, and Scotty Barnes is like $220. I don't know. Is this going to make sense to anybody? Then you just need to bridge the shortfall of $780 somewhere else, right? And it seems convenient to say, well, let's just get $200 in the draft. It's really easy, right? But you could also accumulate $200 in aggregate through development and through trades, right? You could do that in theory. So I think that that's a fair point, that this tank talk is largely something that losing organizations like the Philadelphia 76ers that process tank, whatever, teams like that do that to engage or make losing palatable or engage their fan base. It is lazy. There is a consequence to losing this much. There's a consequence to how you lose. And it takes a long time to wipe away losing from your DNA. I'm not saying that a team that loses, 70 games in a year is like every player on that team is destined to fail, right? But it's not helping. Losing doesn't help. Okay. There's always a trade off. So I believe that, for all the people that are going to point to the two or three teams that tanked and got their championship core, the vast majority of teams that win championships made smart trades, had great organizations, had great coaching. There's way more to it. This wait, what the hell are you doing element of this live is basically looking at the Raptors right now with a chance to get potentially Cooper Flag or Ace Bailey and saying, why are they trying to win right now? Why are they trying to go and win these meaningless games? Because again, the Toronto Raptors have a different understanding internally of who these players are than the average person. I mentioned earlier that I think this team might be one of the more underrated teams in the league. Just collectively, their pieces, each of their pieces are very underrated. I don't think most people think that Scotty Barnes is a championship number one. I do. I assume the Raptors do, but I don't think the average media person or fan polled would agree with that. And that's perfectly okay. He will become that and prove them wrong. I think a lot of people maybe coming into this year saw Grady as like a fifth starter type. I don't think the Raptors see him as a fifth starter type. I think a lot of people see Emmanuel quickly as someone that they would be willing to ship off to for a couple first round picks. I think the Raptors see a potential all-star in Emmanuel quickly. So again, it's like the Jakob Poeltl thing, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah, there are certain things he can't do. And if you only define players by what they cannot do, you miss the bigger picture of what they can do. If you only want to talk about Luka Doncic in terms of defense, you're going to miss the superstar, right? Just like if you're only going to talk about Ben Wallace in terms of height, you're going to miss the superstar. If you're only going to talk about Rasheed Wallace in terms of not getting technicals and being a upclass citizen, even though he was a very upclass citizen, you're going to miss the larger picture. You know, I think the Raptors are like the coolest team to root for because they're just all underdogs. They're all people who've been thrown away. Emmanuel quickly was thrown away in a sense because they didn't think he had what it took to be a starting point guard. RJ Barrett was thrown away as like a toxic asset. Grady was passed up 12 times in the draft. Scotty Barnes was considered by many to be a zero level scorer and a future role player. These players have something common in their DNA, which is they've been overlooked. And I just wish that even though I understand that they will be overlooked by people in Chicago and New York, Indiana, Iowa, France, I just wish they weren't so overlooked in Toronto. That's kind of my hope. I think consolidation trades are all the rage. You think of the 7th overall pick as VJ Edgecombe or, a particular player. I think of it as an asset. You think of Grady's acceleration as a potential championship piece. I think of it as an asset. An asset you may decide to hold on to for the rest of his career is still an asset. Everything the Raptors are doing right now is asset farming and development. You take a look at some of the ancillary cast off pieces or the plate pieces that maybe don't fit into your version of the championship team, like Jakob Pertl, Chris Boucher, guys like this, Bruce Brown. I mean, Bruce Brown, notwithstanding, because he hasn't played, so we're not including him. I'd say Yak and Davion and Boucher have played, well, not so much Davion. I threw Davion in there. Yak and Boucher, at least, have played above their heads this season a little bit. I think they're turning some heads. I think there's a considerable amount of sense to be made from the fact. I don't think it's nonsense to say that they're worth more today than they were 3 weeks ago, right? In a trade. Maybe. I think there's a contender out there that's looking at their bench, looking at these guys and saying, these guys could help us. Maybe we can move off a first round or second round pick for it. And I don't think that necessarily was the case coming into the season. So you think about that. You think about some of these young pieces that are developing. We think about Ochai and we're like, how does he fit in? We think about Scotty and Emmanuel quickly on this first level, thinking of like, okay, well, how do they play together? Yo, forget how they play together right now, right? How did Kyle and DeMar play together? How did JV and DeMar defend together? You just building up an asset. Winning shines everything up. If the Raptors right now were a 50-win team, you'd have a completely different conversation about who RJ is right now. Yes, there would be some serious buzz about RJ being an all-star if they were on a 50-win pace. There'd be talks about Scotty maybe being, an all-NBA type of guy if they were on a 50-win pace. Winning elevates your assets considerably. Winning because people want to trade from the team that's winning, right? Derek White, Drew Holiday, are they worth more today or when Boston picked them up? Kristaps Porzingis, when he was on the Washington Wizards. I was saying we need to trade for Kristaps Porzingis. I wanted to trade Pascal Siakam for Kristaps Porzingis and stuff because I thought that KP was turning a corner in Washington. Why do people not care that he was turning a corner in Washington? Because they were losing. So as long as you continue to lose, all the value that you think that you're getting from these draft picks, you're also losing on your current roster. To put it this way, I mentioned Scotty Barnes being $200. Well, all the losses make him like worth 160. It's like an exchange. You almost pay a tax for losing across your roster. Maybe not the youngest members of your roster because people will excuse that because they don't expect young players, but your middle veteran guys like Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, the value of these guys in trade talks potentially around the league goes up exponentially if you win 58 wins and you get to the second round. If you win 58 wins with Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett starting, there's no question about who they are as NBA players. And now, maybe there's a team out there that's losing that's willing to give you a player that's actually better than these guys, plus a first round pick to get them. Because again, that's the point. At some point, you're going to trade pieces. I hate to break it to you, but maybe RJ or Emmanuel Quickley or both or Yak or Grady even. I don't know. I doubt Grady, but one of these pieces, 5 of these pieces will not be on this team when you're trying to contend for championships. But you need to get there. Just like the Raptors got there with JV, just like the Raptors got there with DeMar, right? You go as far as you can. You build and build. You build up your own data sets. You understand more and more about who these players are, but you keep the asset value high. You keep the numbers respectable. And then when it's time, when the opportunity comes, because the opportunity is important, then you strike. The tanking talk is lazy, but consolidation trades are real. And today, what you could get for Grady plus Ochai, I'm not suggesting trading Grady or Ochai. I'm just saying today, the value of Grady and Ochai might be $80. But to start the season, it was $40. That's great. But that's the value you're not seeing. But you'll see it when someone's actually traded and you see what you get in return. Look at Pascal Siakam last year. Everyone was really mad that the Raptors did not manage to get a great young player for Pascal Siakam. But why did they not get a great young player? The Raptors were a losing team. Number one, that's a really big part of it. The Raptors were a losing team. Everyone knew that they were desperate to sell off of Siakam, so people just didn't want to give you anything. But did did the Raptors being a losing team really change Indiana's interest in bringing in Siakam to pair with Halliburton? No. All it changed was the Raptors' negotiating power, and it changed the narrative around Siakam. If the Raptors were a winning team last year, maybe Siakam nets you a real good young player. Is that fair? And so at that point, the gap between the 8th pick and the 12th pick is made up for in the gap in value on the rest of your roster. So when people talk about tanking, not only are you potentially talking about eroding your culture, not only are you potentially shipping out assets, which is a detriment to your long-term goal of winning a championship or extending that window to win a championship, you are also massively deflating the value of your current asset base. So you deflate the value of your players, and then you inflate the value of your draft picks when you lose. And when you win, you deflate the value of your picks, and you inflate the value of your players. If the goal is to trade players down the line, it helps to win. And consolidation trades, 3 for 1, 2 for 1, like the Raptors did to win the championship, are a good idea. My impassioned word to tank world order: breathe, relax, it's fine. If there's ever a team that is going to turn the 13th overall pick next year into the second best player in next year's draft, it's probably the Raptors. They have a great development staff, they have great scouts, they have great organization, and they have a great team culture. All of these things are helpful. Now, at the end of the day, when you draft an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, they're going to come into a culture which is either going to be positive or negative for their outcome. Okay. And if that culture is negative for their outcome, maybe you get a worse outcome than you were banking on. Okay. This constant clamoring for tanking, 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 this is not like 2022, man. In 2022, you had a middle of the pack talent team, very depleted on the back end of their roster, playing their starters into the ground, okay, and barely getting by to 41 wins with a veteran laden roster, which included a bunch of guys who were coming up for massive extensions. That is so different. It might be the exact opposite of the situation you're in today. Today, you are in an absolutely depleted by design roster on the back end that can easily be swapped out. You have a super young core that is all tied up for the next few years. Scotty and IQ are tied up for the next 5 years. RJ's tied up for the next 3 years, right? Grady's tied up under team control for the next 6 years. You have like Jonathan Mobo, restricted free agent, eventually. These guys are all under team control. There's no Pascal Siakam, Kawhi Leonard, extension looming. There's none of that. There's nothing. There's no Fred VanVleet could walk for nothing ahead of you. So you have a real like first window into being a playoff team, and it starts really right now. Now, as I said, like if the Raptors lose, be cool with it. Don't panic. Don't be sad. And if the Raptors win, also don't be sad. There seem to be people who are so absolutely addicted to misery that whether the Raptors win or lose, they're miserable. And there are some of you. Look in the mirror. It might be you. Where like, oh, they lose. Oh man, Scotty's a bum. RJ's an asshole. Keeps turning the ball over. Grady keeps getting blown by on defense. And then when the same team wins, you're like, oh, we're not getting Cooper Flag. We're not getting Ace Bailey. Like, which is it? Why are you so addicted to misery that you cannot support a team? Yo, it took a lot of guts to play the way the Raptors are playing. Are you missing the forest from the trees here? The Raptors did not use their mid-level. The Raptors have a lot of mismatching pieces. The Raptors are playing their kids, and they're winning. Now, even when they're losing, they're winning. Being down to the wire against Sacramento, win or loss, that's a win. Okay. Getting up 6 against the Denver Nuggets, that's a win for me before Scotty goes out. That's a win. I'm counting wins and losses differently, and I hope the Raptors are too. So what I'm trying to say to Tank World Order is when it's time, reveal yourselves. Until then, shut the fuck up. Okay? Y'all need to just stop being so addicted to misery. You know what I mean? This team is fighting their guts out every night. If you've ever played a competitive sport in your life, you understand watching this team play just how hard they are competing on a night to night basis to even get into these games. But they are young and they are developing and they are not supposed to be as good as they are, but they are somehow. And it's credit to their guts and their work ethic and their motor and how hard they're trying and how much they're competing with for each other and their willingness to break through bad habits. They're fun to watch because they're competitive, and they're competitive because they're trying, and they're trying because they care, and they care because they believe. All I'm asking for you to do is to reciprocate that. When did becoming a fan change? Like, when did this change? You want a championship. Sorry to tell you, not winning one this year. Remember, I mentioned championship odds, and there was a 1% for 25 teams to split the field. That's where the Raptors are right now. You are splitting the 1% chance of a championship this year with 24 other teams. Congratulations. But in years forward, at some point, I think the Raptors will break through. And I do believe they have the building blocks here, especially considering the next 5 draft picks in the next 2 drafts. I believe they have the building blocks for a championship. That does not mean that I believe that Grady Dick will be a number 2 on a championship team, or that RJ will be a number 2 on a championship team, or that Scotty necessarily has to be the number 1 on a championship team, even though I do believe he will be a number 1 on a championship team. It doesn't mean that I believe that. It doesn't mean that I think all of Jonathan Mobo and Ulrich Chamche and all these guys are going to hit. It doesn't mean I think Jameson Battle is going to be on this team for the next 10 years. What it means is that I believe that you have the building blocks to construct a championship. I was addicted to Lego when I was a kid. I used to build cities out of Lego blocks. You didn't need to give me boxed sets for $400. What you needed to give me was a tub of Lego, and I would build that city for you. That's what I'm talking about. You just need the pieces. Then you need to shuffle them around. There's nothing logical about Terrence Ross equals, Terrence Ross plus first round pick equals Serge Ibaka, but that's what the Raptors did. And Serge Ibaka became an invaluable piece for that championship core and also the run up to the championship. He became a huge part of the culture. So maybe Ochai plus first round pick equals the next Serge Ibaka. That's just playing it forward. Okay. So all I'm saying is you be a fan how you want to be a fan. Let me be a fan how I want to be a fan. Okay. I'm not the moral authority on how to be the best fan in the world. Certainly not in a position to be telling anyone how to be a fan. What I'm trying to tell you is that why be miserable when you can be happy? Why sign up for extra misery when you don't have to? That's all that was my real point. It is a win-win. If the Toronto Raptors end up being bad, then this really awesome scouting department and this really awesome team and this great culture is going to welcome in a top 5 pick or a top 6 pick. And if they're a little bit better than expected, then this really awesome team, this really awesome staff is going to welcome in a 13th overall pick or a 14th overall pick or a 15th overall pick. But they're going to welcome them into a team that is much, much better than you thought, right? If the Raptors win 41 wins with a team this young, it's not by osmosis. It's not by fluke. It's because the young players that you thought were supposed to win 24 wins are much better than 24 wins, right? So it is a win-win. If you like, we talked about the next games up until the end of the year. Okay, we talked about trying to find 6 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins somewhere. Can we get to 8 wins? What if you get to 12 wins? Is that a disaster? Hell no. It's a win because you're doing it without Emmanuel Quickly, doing it without Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk. That must mean that Jameson Battle, Grady Dick, Jamal Shed, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, these guys are just better. They're just better. They have to be. Like they're winning some way, right? This is not a rig. This is not rigging the system. You didn't trade 4 first-round picks for Mikal 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. You didn't deplete your future. No, you kept your future intact. You kept your flexibility intact. You made your team as young as humanly possible, and you said, "Go show us who you are." And that team is showing you who they are. Know what I mean? It's a win-win. There's no miserable outcomes here. None. Tonight at 10 p.m., have you covered. Toronto Raptors 905 versus Long Island Nets. We will see if Ulrich can pile up a second game with a ton of blocks. He's feeling good after the last game against the Capital City Go-Go's. And we'll see who else is playing for the 905 tonight. Maybe tonight would be a nice night to get Jamal Shed some 905 run. It might be a nice night to get Jonathan Mobo out there. Now that the Raptors have lost Brandon Carlson, they have a lot of minutes to go around. Wouldn't it be nice to see some of these guys play for the 905? I think it'd be great. And I'm expecting a win. I don't know anything about the Long Island Nets. I'm going to speak like Charles Barkley. Remember Charles Barkley against Angola? And he was asked, oh, what are your thoughts on Angola? And he says, I don't know anything about Angola, but Angola's in trouble. Well, I don't know anything about the Long Island Nets. But if Jonathan Mobo and Jamal Shed and Jacoby Walter play for the Raptors 905 tonight, I think the Long Island Nets are in trouble. So, SP saying Shed, Walter, Battle, Mobo, Shamshay. Well, that's not going to happen probably, but I mean, you'd have to bench Kennedy Chandler. But Jaden saying bring your ass. Okay, same energy, right? Eddie the Moosh said, hey, Rob, great pod. Remember once upon a time the Spurs were good. David Robinson got hurt. They tanked and got Tim Duncan and created a monster. Be nice if we did the same. Flag might be generational. So Eddie the Moosh is basically repeating all the points that I'm trying to counter against. The fundamental difference between Eddie the Moosh and I is that I think you already have your Cooper flag, which is Scotty Barnes. You can argue you want a second one, but that's where I think we fundamentally disagree. If you want to get down to the core of it, that's where we disagree. Most of us disagree on one fundamental thing. How good is Scotty Barnes actually? How good can he be? How good will he be? Because if I told you right now that Scotty would be a top 5 player in the NBA and you had a crystal ball and you could actually see it happening, if I built a time machine for you right now, okay, let me ask you a question right now. Let's say I build you a time machine and I bring you to 2030. And the only thing you know about 2030 is that Scotty Barnes is like the 3rd best player in the league. Now do you feel a little bit differently? I think you might. Now, what if I bring you to 2030 and Scotty Barnes is a top 50 player in the league and he never made another All-Star team? Now do I feel differently? Hell yeah, I'd feel way differently. If I knew for sure that by 2030, Scotty would never make another All-Star team, he wouldn't make an All-NBA team, he would just kind of plateau, his handle would never come around, everything would just sort of stagnate with him, would I feel differently about tanking? Yes, I would. So I empathize with most people who want to tank right now. I do. I just fundamentally disagree with you about how good you think these young players are going to be. And I think if we can get down to the crux of this issue, if we can get around the politicking and the trying to be nice to each other, the real difference here is how good do you think Scotty Barnes is actually going to be? How good do you think Grady is actually? How good do you think Emmanuel Quickly is? How good do you think RJ Barrett is? I think that's the real question. Okay? That's the real question. Trust me, when the Orlando Magic started winning a couple of years ago, there was a lot of Magic fans who started complaining that they need to tank. Even though they had just tanked for Paolo, they had just tanked for Suggs, they had just tanked for Franz. It took a long time. But the minute they got a touch of the playoffs last year, even though they didn't make it past the first round, all the tanking talk is dead. Dead. When Paolo went out, diagnosed with 3-4 weeks to be reevaluated or whatever the hell it was. I think it was like, it might be 6 weeks that he's out. There's not a single Magic fan that I remember saying, oh, we need to tank. Paolo's out. This draft is great. No, they were like, Franz, Jalen Suggs, step up. I will be very happy when the Raptors turn the page on the ugliness of the last 4 years and just get back to, we want to win. That's going to be nice. Clutch Tatum saying RJ is better than Paolo. Well, I mean, he's not, but you know my take on this. It's close. Subscribe. you should subscribe. We're very, very close to breaking another milestone on the subscriptions. So I would be very much deeply appreciative if you did subscribe. And we're going to bring in, if you have a call in, like if you want to call, I believe I owe it to you guys to allow some call-ins, because last night the call-ins did not go super great towards the end. So if you have a thought about whether the Raptors should tank, not tank, whether I'm wrong about this, call in. The link is in the description. Ali, what's up?
Hey Rob, how's it going?
Not too bad. How are you?
Doing well. Well, sorry I don't have the camera on because it's a bit dark in here, and yeah, I haven't been able to call over the last little while. It's the time difference and a lot going on in life anyway. But
Where are you based again?
Ireland,
Oh, right. Yes,
you might
Ireland.
remember.
It became dark.
Remember, yeah,
Yes, gotcha.
yes. It actually gets dark here at 5 o'clock. It's quite crazy in the winter.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, yeah, it's so frustrating. Listening to a lot of Raptor fans complaining all the time. I mean, I understand because some people are impatient, but um, I don't know if they're watching the game, or the games and watching our players play, because the energy this year is so different.
Mm,
They're
I agree.
together.
Yeah.
They play well together. They're
Ali,
playing in the.
do you mind stepping off and coming back? Your audio is clicking, click, 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 click.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, I can log out and come back in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just try once, because it's probably going to be really disruptive to hear it. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, let me
Come
try
back.
that. Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. As we wait for Ali, yes. Like overall, let me just see if there are super chats or anything to respond to. Motaz Musa with the watch Attack on Titan, brother. Shout outs to Motaz, who has been telling everybody to watch Attack on Titan, which is anime. And thank you. Thank you for your constant support of that. I think I'm pretty firm on this. I've never watched anime in my life, but I will, like, next week when I have some time, I will do that for you for sure. Thanks for the super chat. Ali, what's up?
Hey, is that better?
It's still a little bit clicky, but yeah, it's okay.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I was just. I'll make it quick. Then I don't want to. Don't want you to hear me well. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, I even like argue about this with some few of my friends back home in Toronto. Who are just hating on the Raptors or even Scotty Barnes for some reason. I don't think a lot of these guys watch the games. They see their record. They probably see the highlights. And they're like, "Oh, look at this team. They're 2-12, and now maybe 3-12." They're not watching how good these games are, how close these games are,
Mm,
how much they're pushing good teams on the other side while playing at what 50% of the health, right?
right.
Of proper rotational players, right?
Mhm.
So it's very encouraging to see that. I Last season I remember when I was watching the Raptors, I said to my friends, I said, "Look, something is off. I these are not the Raptors I know. The energy was off. The playing style was different, very selfish oriented playing style, right? Um,
Last year
it just felt last
or,
year,
or last year they
at
felt
the beginning
selfish.
of last year,
Okay,
like
yeah,
at the
okay.
beginning of last year. Yeah, yeah. When Dennis Schroeder and Pascal Siakam and all, they're all there.
Mhm.
Um, it just didn't feel like that they were playing a proper team game. Um, it's so different this year. This year they're playing for each other, and they're playing with a lot of camaraderie and a lot of fight. You know, um, I see. I mean, to be very honest, like I think if this team was healthy, I think they at least would have had an even record. At least, my belief is that and they've had objectively, the toughest schedule to begin the NBA. Right, toughest first 22 games, is it? If I'm not wrong.
Mhm. Verse 25. So I'm actually going to show something to you, and this will back up something you're saying. Okay, so this is the Spot Tracks injured team. So it's a real time look at the injured cash totals for each NBA team. Guess who's number 2?
Oh yeah, Raptor.
The Toronto Raptors.
Yeah,
So everyone was talking
I
about the
bet
New
you.
Orleans Pelicans. Oh my God, the Pelicans are decimated. Oh my God. In terms of games missed, the Pelicans have, and by the way, This would be so easily number one Raptors if Scotty Barnes was already on his max deal. Easily. The Raptors
Yeah.
would be clearing the New Orleans Pelicans if Scotty Barnes was already on his max deal. The only reason this is not as high as it should be is because Scotty Barnes is still on his rookie deal. That's the only reason. Now, the Pelicans, their best player is a max player. The Clippers, their best player is a max player. Memphis, best player is a max player. Phoenix, Philly, Boston, all of these teams, their best players are all earning north of 35 to 40 million dollars. Okay. When I look at teams like Philly, like look at the games missed. 75 games missed for the Raptors already. Total days missed 166. God damn it.
That's ridiculous.
166 games missed. It's crazy. So
Hmm.
the Toronto Raptors are really battling uphill. And then, as you mentioned, they do have the toughest schedule to start the year. They've been on the road. They had that massive road trip, and they've been so competitive and so close. So yeah,
Like Denver games, at least the first one, that would have been ours if Scotty didn't get hurt at the end. I think.
absolutely. And so 5 and
Yeah.
11, the metrics change completely. Add Scotty in, to the rest of it. Like even without Emmanuel quickly, I think just having RJ and Scotty alone puts you in a lot of different conversations just defensively. Like the Raptors have been so bad defensively. I don't think people understand how much Scotty can do for that. So and offensively, of course, like playing all these rookie lineups, playing some of the funky lineups. Even last night, what I noticed with Darko Rajakovic is he kept a shorter rotation, right? I don't know if you noticed that,
Yes.
but like,
Yes.
we didn't see Jacoby Walter getting off the bench, which, I love Jacoby, but right now he's probably not helping you win at all. Okay.
No.
Jamal Shad is not helping you win right now at all.
No.
These are
No.
good players. They're going to be fine players. But right now, Chris Boucher helps you win more than those guys. It is worth noting,
Yes.
however, last night, if you had to guess, who do you think had the highest box plus minus among the players who played?
Mm, I would have said either Grady or Scotty.
It definitely was not Grady or Scotty. Scotty was number 2. RJ was number 1. Do you know who had the worst?
Nope.
Davion. So I
Not surprising.
really wanted to give him his credit because, again, I watched like 6, 7 good plays from him last night, but the offensive rating was abysmal with Davion on the court yesterday. It was like I think 78. So the Raptors just could not score with Davion on the court.
Okay.
So that was
Wow.
was
That's crazy.
interesting. It was interesting to see. But I think part of that is the lineups as well that he played with. But anyways, yeah. So I agree with your general philosophical overview that a lot of people are just seeing it. But do you have any reasons as to why you think that is?
Why do I think that people are not giving that? Well, I think a lot of. I mean, I like Raptors fans. I mean, I've been a Raptors fan all my life, but um, I've come across this all throughout my life. I'm not sure if you agree with me or not. A lot of people, I'm not going to say everyone, but a bunch of people are kind of, they're kind of casual fans. They they don't watch all the games. They watch either the scores or the highlights. They're not analyzing the games properly. They're not taking different factors into consideration. I mean, my friends call me an optimist. I say I'm actually a reasonable optimist. Okay, I could be an optimist, but I'm reasonable. I'm not unreasonable. I'm not going to say, oh, Raptors are, should be considered the top of the East this year, because that'd be unreasonably optimist, right?
Hmm.
I'm a reasonable optimist. I'd say, look, I know our starting lineup of Grady, Scotty, Emmanuel Quickly, and RJ Barrett, and whoever else fifth you put in there, a veteran like Jakob Pertl, who can shoot, but he can defend. Might not too much in the perimeter, but he can defend the interior, right?
Hmm.
That's a good lineup to compete with, And I'm not. That's a reasonable statement to make based on their history and based on the developments, right? And how hard they work every single offseason, correct?
Sure.
Um, so that's not unreasonable. Seeing how the latter half of last season was, how they were playing well together, but they got injured. So if you look at different factors, and again, I don't want to repeat myself, but how this season started, how how they play well together, how we haven't had a healthy lineup yet, but how the entire team, including the bench, play well together. I think if you take all that into account, along with the fact that we have to have the toughest schedule to start with, I think it's there. There is a bright light there. And people need to see that. But people, I think a lot of people have a very simplistic way of looking at things. They just see wins and losses, and or stats, and hey, we suck. you know,
Yeah.
Sucks.
Yeah. All right, Ali, I really appreciate it. It's always good to do these earlier lives, especially like sometimes like we get a live at 3 a.m. or sometimes a live at even 1 p.m. We always get different callers from different time zones. So it's really cool. I'm glad you were able to call. Glad you were able to catch it. And I'm glad that
Yeah,
you're a reasonable optimist and that you're seeing the bigger vision with this team because I don't think a lot of people are. And I hope they do soon, but that's okay. You can't please everyone 100% of the time. So I appreciate you calling me,
definitely not.
man. Yeah.
Not a
All
problem.
right.
Just having said that, I will just say that even if we lose, I think I'm happy with with the higher draft pick. So either way,
I'm
we're happy.
Exactly. It's a perfect
Yeah.
place to be as a fan base. I described it yesterday as driving a car in circles in the parking lot.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yes.
You're not getting off the parking lot. It doesn't really matter if you end the if you end the season on the left side of the parking lot or the right side of the parking lot, you're still in the parking lot. And
That's it.
getting off the parking lot obviously means contention, getting past the first round, getting into the second round. The best case scenario for this season, in my opinion, is probably a competitive loss in the first round. The the worst case scenario, which to some people is the best case scenario, is a bottom five finish. In either case, you're building culture, you're building habits, you're building players, and you're not winning a championship. So it's cool. I'm cool with all outcomes as well. Yeah. Anyways,
100%.
man, thanks for calling in, Ollie.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Chat. Good
Cheers.
chat. Take care.
See ya. Jay, what's up?
How's it going, bro?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good, good, good. Just quick question. Who do you think what do you think the rotation is going to be when everybody's coming back healthy? Because it seems like that's happening pretty quickly here. All of a sudden, Jacoby Walters, ready. Scotty Barnes, I think surprised a lot of people. Like exactly 3 weeks, he's back and he's playing. Bruce Brown seems like he's coming back soon. I don't know what's going on with Kelly, but um, people are coming back pretty quickly. So, what do you think the rotation is going to be like, and who's going to be the odd man or man out?
That's a really good question. So I think the Raptors got what they wanted to do early on in the season, which is they played a lot of their young players some competitive minutes against some very good teams. I think those one of the biggest things with a lot of young players is like you got to show them what they don't know and then you got to prove it to them. Right? It's almost like it's difficult to like do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like you gotta break the ego first, right? Because these are all like either five-star recruits or the guys that think they know what they're doing. They scored 20 points per game, in college, whatever, right? So getting them to buy in to the humility of where they actually are as players and then teaching them how to do the right things and guide them on the process to becoming better only starts with their acceptance of how good they are right now. And I think a lot of these players have found out they're not as good as they probably thought they were, right? Like Jamal Shed, uh, Jacoby Walter, Jonathan Mobo, they have all struggled immensely at times this season. They've had moments of success, yes, but they've had tremendous failures as well. Now you can send at least some of them to the G League. So I'm not worried about, oh my God, they're not playing games. Oh my God, they're out of the rotation. What are the Raptors doing? And they're trying to compete. In terms of like who should be in the rotation. I think Chris Boucher has played himself into the rotation. I think Davion has played himself into the rotation. I think Ochai is a non-negotiable in the rotation. Kelly, Bruce. That's five, right? And you got okay, so starting lineup: Emmanuel Quickly, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, Jakob Pertl. That's your starting five. I think off your bench, you get Ochai, Kelly, Bruce, Boucher, Davion. That's your 10.
So, based on just does this team seem like they would be tanking, like fully healthy? There's no way. I know you were just talking about that, but there's no way. You literally have to hold these guys out, or literally tell them not to play, or to lose on purpose for them to even be a bottom three, bottom four team. Like, just being realistic, they're not bad enough. I'm not even being a fan right now. I'm being unbiased. Like, just if I was a fan of another team, looking at this roster that you just named with the lineup and the bench, that doesn't seem like a tanking team to me. So I just don't know what the I guess the ceiling of the team this year. I know we have to have patience, and can't you know we have to temper our expectations a little bit. But I feel like with a healthy team, starting five, the starting five is pretty good, and then you got a bench. You have like 3 or 4 veterans on there, and then Ochai, he's a young player, I guess, but that's a pretty good team. What do you think?
Well, I think that you have to think of every season in quarters. I like to, at least, and you don't have to. You can think of it in 82 you can think of it as 82 segments, which is 82 games. But I like to think of it in chunks, maybe 10-game chunks if we're being really granular about it, but at the very least 20-game chunks, right? So maybe in the first 20 games you have to implement your offensive principles, defensive principles, get rookies coached up, get everybody in shape, implement the chemistry, get people used to playing with each other. Then in the next 20 games, which is the following 20 games after 3 more games, I think we'll be kind of at the 20-game mark. That point, you'll start probably preparing for the trade deadline, right? So at that point, as much as you're saying that this roster and this rotation makes sense, and maybe they don't look like a tanking team, it's still you're still in the 25 to 50% of your season being done mark. So just because you're competitive in that place doesn't mean you can't pull the plug on it. Doesn't mean you can't sustain another major injury. Doesn't mean you can't lose Jakob Poeltl for the rest of the season. Touch wood, hope that doesn't happen. So there's still a lot that can go wrong. What I'm saying is, how would you feel about this team if you traded Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher for future picks and you got back nothing?
I think that would send the wrong message to the team, because if you're gonna trade these veterans, and you're basically telling them, "Hey, we're gonna lose on purpose, and I know you guys are trying hard and doing everything you need to do, and you're playing very competitively, but you know what? Let's just make
What
the
if they're
team
10 and
worse."
25? What if they're 10 and 25 and you make that move? Is that
I
fair then?
I think it would be fair at that point, especially if they're all healthy and they're all playing and they're still not showing any results. Then
Sure.
you got to pull the plug. But I think if they're playing like what we saw yesterday, like consistently, and they're always competitive in games,
Hmm.
it's going to be a hard sell to tell, "Hey, Scotty, by the way, we know you like winning. We know you're a winning player, but we're going to just get rid of all these players." Kind of like what happened last year, not last year, but the year before. Kind of, there was like kind of messaging that we're going to get rid of OG and Siakam and all this stuff. And you remember how emotional he got about all that, partly because I guess that's his friends. Secondly, is probably because he was actually trying to win, and then he's like, "Wow, we're trying to actually lose now. We're like getting rid of players and all that." I feel like that set up the locker room to be kind of toxic. At least contributed to it a little bit. And Nick Nurse didn't help either. But I just feel like it's
I
gonna
think
be
you might,
hard.
it's almost like you're talking about 2022, but you keep referencing 2023. So the Nick Nurse stuff was 2022. Last year, Darko coached this team. And I don't think this team necessarily got toxic at any point. I think what was clear, at least to Pascal Siakam and his representatives, was that the Raptors were trying to trade Siakam for 2 years. Two
Yeah,
years he was on the block. 2 years he was in conversations. Atlanta, Sacramento, Indiana, other teams that we heard of, right? OG was in conversations for at least a year and a half, actually. So these
yeah,
conversations have been had. Every team understands, and this is on record from Thaddeus Young to many players who've talked about it in podcasts. When your team underperforms at the mid-season mark, everybody's on the block, except for your untouchables. Do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
So, sorry if you're doing something in the background, just mute yourself because it's creating a lot of noise.
So I think I'm not really referencing 2022. I'm just kind of worried that if
Well, you're saying
they're
toxic locker room, and I don't think the locker room ever got toxic last year.
maybe not last year, maybe the year before. But my point is, I'm just worried that if we start selling and getting rid of.
Hello? Can't really hear you. Am I losing my mind? Chat, can you hear him? You're not muted. Oh, we've lost him. Well, if he comes back, that's cool. I think we got the point. I get the point. Selling could send the wrong message. I'll say this. If your team is 10 and 25, everybody who is on a 1-year deal expects to be moved. If you're a veteran, expect to be moved. Nobody will complain. This team is very together. The core is together. If you trade Emmanuel Quickly or Grady Dick tomorrow, yes, Scotty will be very surprised and probably feel very betrayed by that. I'm sure of it. However, at some point, the star player has to have trust that people need to do their jobs. Okay, this is like we're going right back to film set analogy here, and I'm sorry to like bring it up, but that's the one thing I know better than anything is film. And on a film set, we have different roles, right? I got to do my role as a director. You got to do your job as a set dresser. You got to do your job as an actor. Okay, I can help you do your job, but I can't tell you how to do your job. I can't manage your job, and I definitely better not know how to do your job better than you do. Okay, so Scotty Barnes can have an input on the type of offense. He can have, discussions and coaching meetings as he has had, as he's been out. Like the two injuries Scotty's had have been both blessings in disguise because I think he's become a more mature and better leader and more connected with his teammates, all of his teammates. So what I'm saying is he can have a say in stuff like this. Like he can have a say in how fast he wants the team to go. He can have a say in certain lineups and talk to Darko and say, hey, like I really don't like what it's looking like with me and Kelly. Here's how I think we can fix it. But I don't think that Scotty should be the GM. I don't think RJ should be the GM. I don't think Emmanuel Quickly should be the GM. And I don't think Masai Ujiri has to think of himself as one of the crew. Be who you are and do your fucking job. Darko Rajakovic is not a player. He is not a GM. He is a coach. Do your job as a coach. Coach the team. The development staff is there to develop. When you see dysfunctional sets, film sets, or teams in general, it's when players are trying to be GMs, coaches are trying to be players, and GMs are trying to be fans. Like everybody has to do their job. Okay. That's really what it is. So in the end, if the team is 10 and 25, presumably it is fair game that players can get traded. And at that point, if Scotty's a little bit sad to see his friend Chris Boucher go, sucks. Tough love. That's tough shit. But is it really that bad to trade Jakob Poeltl if you're 10 and 25 to get him onto a contender? The Raptors always do well by their players. It's not like they send players to like barren wastelands. When's the last time you saw the Raptors do that? They didn't do what the Clippers did. Remember the Clippers when they signed Blake Griffin and they inked him to this extension? They talked about how he was the future of the franchise. And then like 5 months later, they traded him to Detroit. Yeah. The Raptors have never done anything like that, ever. They have only ever sent players into beautiful situations that the player themselves probably would have preferred. Sending a workhorse like DeMar DeRozan to San Antonio, Jakob Poeltl, sending JV to Memphis, sending Kyle Lowry to his desired destination, which was Miami, sending Pascal Siakam to his desired destination, sending OG to his desired destination. The Raptors understand one fundamental thing. When one thing happens with one player, 450 players know about it. When one thing happens with one agent, 200 agents know about it. This is the long game that the Raptors play. They will not throw Emmanuel Quickly away to nobody. You know what I mean? Just like they didn't toss Fred VanVleet away to Milwaukee to come off the bench in a contract year. They didn't do that. The Raptors have a really good idea of that, and they have a good pulse on the human side of this. So, yeah, what I'm trying to say is if the Raptors are 20 and 20 and they start tearing it down, yes, you as a player have a right to be like, what the fuck? We did our job. Now you're doing something else, and we feel betrayed. That's different. If Scotty Barnes is healthy to go and he's having team doctors say, no, 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 we need you to sit for an extra 2.5 weeks because we want Cooper Flag, that's going to burn a lot of bridges. You can't do that. These are human beings at the end of the day. If you, as an organization, Masai Ujiri, you're giving Darko Rajakovic this poo-poo platter of a young roster with a whole bunch of second draft guys and not a lot of talent, and you're saying develop these guys into winners, and then the minute they start winning, you start shutting them down, then he is going to lose trust in you. This whole thing works on a continuum of trust. It also works on a continuum of people doing their goddamn jobs. So to end this live on that note, I will say this. The Raptors are way better than people around the league are giving them credit for. Now, today, my heart swelled with joy when I was listening to the panel. I'm not on the panel today, which is why I was able to do this live to fill in my 2 hours. And Casual, shout outs to Casual, was on the panel. And he was like, why are we sleeping on the Raptors? The Raptors took the Celtics to overtime. They beat the Pacers. They beat the Minnesota Timberwolves. This is not a bad team. I heard that and I was like, yo, that felt nice. It felt good to have somebody talking about how hard your team fights. When I listen to other coaches say, that's a really hard working team, that makes me happy as a fan. I hope it makes you happy as a fan. And I hope that that happiness leads you to have a more enjoyable time as a fan. It sucks that something that makes me happy might make you sad. We can agree on that. What I'm going to caution you to prevent further fireworks and me having to edit 5-hour lives is this. When the Raptors win, please, for the love of God, please try to do your best to respect my wishes to not want to talk about tanking. We can talk about tanking on off days. We can talk about tankings on the weekends. We can talk about tankings on when we inevitably end up losing like 10 straight games on the road or something like that later in the season. We can have that discussion then. When it's time, we can have the discussion. Until that time, let's try to remove the tanking talk. Because remember that thing that I said about human beings? Well, the funny thing is, these players, they listen to the media, unfortunately. They are on Twitter. And everything they're seeing is capture the flag, capture the flag, capture the flag. How does that make you feel? How would it make you feel? Try to empathize. Hear me when I'm saying this. How does that make you feel about the city that you're in? That every fucking thing that you're doing, you're working so goddamn hard. You're beating these teams, and your fan base is groaning that you're not getting a 17-year-old kid in the draft. Now, I understand these are professional athletes and they need to get tuned with it. But is that really what you want Jonathan Mobo and Jamal Shed and Jacoby Walter to think about? Is that really what you want their impression of our fan base to be? I don't mean to sound like a cult leader and like one of those like rah fans, but like, do you get what I'm saying? For real though, if you want to remove the tanking talk, what's with the constant roast on Paul Wall? Can you call in and actually turn on your microphone? Like, I would love to bring you in studio. Like, you're just in. Like, this is last. I can't. Well, then why are you in the studio without your mic? I don't understand. Nobody's roasting Yak. I'm being honest about Jakob Pertl. I don't have to look, man. I don't have to tell you that RJ Barrett is a superstar in order to support RJ Barrett. I can just be happy for him being who he is. I don't have to tell you that Jakob Pertl is the second coming of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for me to support Jakob Pertl. And I certainly do not need to agree that Davion Mitchell is like some superstar, role player. You know what I mean? Basically, without Yak, Toronto will no stop. When have you ever heard me disagree with that? Ever? I have literally said, if you trade Jakob Pertl, you will get way worse. But the moment you trade Jakob Pertl, the message is clear to your entire team. And I don't believe that this early in the season, you get to explain. You can't justify quitting on a season 16 games into the season when you're 4-12 and you've had the hardest record. You've had all these injuries. You have to give this team a chance. You have to, because otherwise, all that work that they put in the offseason, they won't do it the next offseason. You have to incentivize people some way. There must be like you can say, okay, the horse and carrot show or whatever. You must understand the human element of this. This is a team that worked extra hard this offseason to get way better. Ochai, Grady. This is not a fluke. These guys are massively better than they were last year because they worked for it. Okay. This team, connectivity. They RJ said it. I've never met my teammates this much during the off season in my life. Like, this is the most connected I've ever been. You saw his reaction yesterday in the post game. Scotty Barnes, like the way he's talking about him. Like, these guys have known each other for years. Okay, like Scotty and RJ, their relationship goes back like to 16, 15 years old, right? But my point is that this is a team that put in the work so that they can get better as a team. They are a team that is going out there trying to win every single game. And they're in a lot of these games partially because, to use the old cliche, they want it more. So how do you put this team into the grinder to work this hard and say, look, we are leaving this mid-level exception, moving off of Gary Trent Jr., moving off of this, we're not trading guys, etc., because we want to give you a chance to prove who you are. And then when they prove that they're better than you thought they were, then you trade away Jakob Poeltl. That doesn't make sense to me. So trading away Yak can happen only when the math allows it to be justifiable. Because again, justifiable actions are the only ones that you can take here. So if you trade Yak and you're 10-12 on the season, I don't think that'll go well with this team. I think internally they're going to be like, nah, we were good and they forced us to be bad. Okay? But if you're 10-23, 10-24, which by the way is very bad and will be mathematically like you're really on the edge here, right? 10-22, 10-23, 10-24. Yeah. At that point, no one will cry if you trade Jakob Poeltl. Easy to say we need better, but please feel free to let us know who. Okay, Paul Wall, like I'm gonna ask you one thing. Either connect your device or I'm booting you and banning you from the studio. I'm not trying to be rude, but like why show up in the studio, take up a space and not turn on your camera and not turn on your microphone just to put your name here? I don't understand this at all. So turn on your mic next time or turn on your something. So now someone who has turned on their mic is Jacob Shen, whose mic is muted right now, ironically. But Jacob, what's going on? Final caller of the day. What's up?
Hey man, sorry. This is my first time calling. I actually didn't expect to be on so soon, actually.
Okay.
Um, I do want to actually just get one thing, guys, clear up a few things before I guess asking you a few questions. Is that I started watching basketball basically right when the Raptors won the championship. So when if I say something that may be seen naive or anything, it's not because I'm stupid or anything. I probably am relatively naive and new to the game. Um, but yeah. But I did want to ask you, so I think at the start of the season you mentioned that there were three holes, like before the draft, there were like three holes on the roster, which is backup point guard, shooting, and backup center.
Mhm.
I would say at right now we are in the process of plugging in the shooting, in the process of plugging in backup point guard. But backup center, we are either just started the process with Urich or like it's kind of unknown at the moment.
Mhm.
So I think with the third problem that is there doesn't seem to be a new timetable, at least a timetable that's going to fix the problem anytime soon. What do you think the Raptors plan to do with that going forward?
Backup center is not a difficult position to fill. It's actually a really easy position to fill because centers are what bad teams who want to get worse usually trade away. So you look at a guy like a Jonas Valanciunas in Washington, he will probably be traded at some point. He would be a backup center, right? Reuniting Yak and Jonas would be hilarious, but you get my point.
Yeah.
So not even that expensive though. I don't think it's going to be that expensive. Like the Dallas Mavericks traded for Daniel Gafford last year. The Mavericks turned a corner with their trades for Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington because largely those teams were pretty bad. Now, who's to say the Raptors, if they string off some wins here, can't make their own trades for their own version of Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington with the abundance of expirings and picks that they have, right?
I see.
So I think the backup point guard is still a big hole for me. I would prefer Davion be a third string point guard and not a de facto second string point guard. Like last night, notwithstanding, I think he played okay last night, but there were some issues last night as well that I didn't want to talk about in in the spirit of trying to keep things positive last night, but throughout the season, I don't think that he's necessarily proven that he's a de facto backup point guard. Like a de facto backup point guard, the best version of that is like Peyton Pritchard. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Like I see your point with that. The only thing is, I guess, for backup point guard, we at least have like two candidates, whereas backup center, the only one who
I
we
think they're
think the
both
Raptors are.
closer to. Sorry to cut you off. There's
Yeah,
more. I think they're both a little bit closer right now to backup third string point guard than an actual backup point guard. They're closer to
okay.
Corey Joseph than they are to prime Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, yeah, I
so
see your point. They're like serviceable on some minutes, but like they're probably not in the level of backup point guard. But
right, like Malachi Flynn, Delano Banton, right? Those were backup point guards for Fred VanVleet, right? I think one could argue those were both closer to third string point guards than actual backup point guards. I think actual backup point guards are like Tyus Jones, Cole Anthony, you know? Now, that doesn't mean that Cole Anthony can't start in a pinch or that Tyus can't start in a pinch, and he is starting. But I think there's a qualitative difference between like a real backup point guard and a third string point guard. I think the Raptors have two third string point guards who are trying to elevate themselves into a second string point guard, and we'll see which one of them can elevate. But I don't think either one of them are elevating themselves this year. I think Jamal
yeah,
Shed is
okay.
way too far as a shooter, and I think Davion is way too far as a creator and decision maker and shooter. And so
Yeah,
what they provide defensively is a nice change of pace. So maybe those are the kind of guys that plug a hole when your backup point guard is injured or your starting point guard is injured and they move up a peg for like 10 games in a year. Or maybe those are the guys that when your backup point guard's really struggling and getting blitzed by the matchup, that's where you're like, okay, backup point guard, sit down, let me unleash Davion Mitchell on this guy.
yeah,
Because right now it makes sense. But Davion doesn't make sense on most nights. But the nights he does
yeah,
make sense, it looks really cool, you know? So I think the Raptors can do two things. So as you mentioned, the shooting is sort of being plugged in, right? Between is it aggregate plug between Battle plus Grady plus Ochai
yeah,
plus potentially Emmanuel quickly when he returns. I think you get a lot of shooting, plus potentially Scotty and uh, RJ taking a step as shooters. I think the backup center spot can be plugged via trade, and I think the backup point guard spot can be plugged via the mid-level exception
okay.
or the buyout market. So depending on who gets waived, the Raptors have
Yeah.
maybe shit sign someone from Europe.
I
It's
see your point. The
possible.
only thing is, like, I guess knowing how the Raptors think and everything, they're probably not just gonna have unless like the team gets so good to the point where you basically just need a backup center or like a competent point guard that you plug these two in and you're a contender. I don't think the front office is gonna go like in that direction. So I think what they will likely try to do is find a, I guess, young center who is good enough to fill the backup center role and try to develop him if once eventually, yeah, for lack of better words, gets too old to be like as serviceable. Whereas that's kind of what they're doing with like Davion Mitchell and Jamal Shed right now, where they're both
Mhm.
young enough to a point where they can grow into backup point guards. But like if you
Right.
get like a 28-year-old backup center from a different team, it's not going to last very long. It's like it's a plug and play and it's for like 2 years, and then you have to switch again if the team wants to keep competing.
I hear you. Yeah. I think probably different schools of thought on that, but I hear what you're saying. Anyways, man, any final thoughts? And by the way, for all that you said about like you started watching basketball in 2019, you sound very, very knowledgeable. Just my take.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess one of the reasons why I actually watch you and not the rest is because I think like I was like running through 3 or 4 channels before I landed on you, and like everyone just kept saying the same thing to the point where like it was like not much fun to watch anymore. But
Well, it's good to listen to different things. I
yeah,
think
yeah, that's
we
definitely
don't really want an echo chamber. It's great. Sometimes I'll listen to people, other channels and whatever, and I want to hear what they're saying, even though I completely disagree with it, because I think listening to dissenting opinions and even listening to that very aggravating conversation last night, I think was very
yeah. I
informative for
remember
me.
I was watching on because I didn't actually figure out how to use this calling before. But yeah, I
Yeah,
saw that conversation. It was something else.
yeah.
Um,
All right, man. Take
yeah,
care and have a great one.
I'll leave you with this thought. One final
Sure.
thought. So what I have noticed is like, for lack of better words, sometimes it seems like you get too emotional when certain talking points are just repeated. And honestly, most of the cases, those points are bad, but just they have a hard time communicating like last night, so it gets like a bit frustrating to that point.
Absolutely.
Um, I would say, shoot, lost my train of thought. I guess I'll say this. Try don't focus too much on what the person is, I guess the point that the person's trying to make, but maybe try to see what the person's like school of thought is or what the person's perspective at the moment at the time probably is. And it seems like that was what you were trying to do last night, but it just got lost in translation.
I think it's really difficult to communicate when people are not hearing each other, right? So
Uh,
if I don't listen to what you just said, it's going to be really difficult for me to respond to it, right? If everything you say does not impact what I'm going to say back, right? Like that's like I think when people have conversations in relationships where they're fighting, they're talking at each other, not with each
yeah,
other, right? So if you bring up a point about a particular stat which pokes a hole in something that I've said, and I don't adjust what I've said or correct what I've said, now we're not really having a conversation. We're just talking at each other. And I
yeah,
think conversations where people talk at each other, whether I'm doing it or whether the other person's doing it, are frustrating for a plethora of reasons. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's difficult to navigate conversations like that on 4 hours into a live,
yeah.
but
But that's the
I
difference
definitely
between
need to be
like,
better, and I'll
yeah,
take full accountability for the fact that I need to be a little bit more patient as
no, but
well.
like, yeah, I appreciate you like acknowledging that's usually the first step. But that's the difference between like a debate and discussion. Whereas debate, you try to kill the other person. Debate discussion is you trying to learn something and adjust your viewpoint.
Sure.
But yeah,
I don't necessarily think that's the definition of a debate, but that's a completely different conversation for a different day. Anyways,
yeah,
Jake,
fair
thanks
enough.
a lot for calling in, man.
Okay,
Appreciate you.
no problem.
Cheers. Yo, Rock UK, what's going on, man? Always a
Yo,
pleasure to hear. Yo, what's going on?
what up? How you doing, man?
I'm great. How are you?
11,500 subscribers. Wow, dude. That's crazy.
It's coming along. When did you
Yo,
subscribe? When we were like 500 subscribers?
something like that. Yeah, something like that. It's been a good ride for you. I'm just looking at you. I'm looking at Raptors Republic. I'm looking at, hello and welcome. I'm addicted to the Raptors. I live in the UK, but I'm addicted to them. So every time I watch the game, which I watched at like 5 a.m. this morning, I'm on these different podcasts just listening to everybody's thoughts. And I came across JD Bunkis's podcast. I think it was either yesterday or the day before. He had Blake Murphy on there.
I
I
watched
don't
it.
know. Did you manage to catch that?
So someone sent it to me. I don't know who I should give credit to for that. I think someone messaged it to me, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who did. I think it was Recruiter Dude. I think Recruiter Dude sent it to me. Hang on, let me just check here. If I'm not mistaken, yes, it was. It was Recruiter Dude. Said, yeah, he sent it. He sent me the clip, and he. I thought I was supposed to get mad at it. I didn't get that mad at it. What were your thoughts on it?
I got frustrated as hell, dude. This guy was blasting Scotty Burns. First of all, he was saying that he is all about the tank. So a complete contrast to what you're saying. He's even titled the podcast Ethical Tank. So basically, this guy's on board for losing every game possible and maybe
Mhm.
throwing a few wins in there as much as he can, but just basically tanking. And I'm thinking to myself, what has there ever been an example of a team that is too good to tank, but tanks anyway, and then comes back and competes the next year? I was scratching my head thinking about this today, and I actually called in just so that I could get your thoughts on that to see if you can maybe come up with an example. I couldn't think of one.
A team that's too good to tank, but tanked anyway and came back the next year. OKC.
Came back the next year and competed.
OKC.
Give me
Yeah,
the year that happened and who they got.
I think that was the year they got Chet Holmgren, or the year they got Case and Wallace. So I think they threw games down the line. Oh, actually, the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks are a great example. Dallas tanked for Derek Lively towards the end of the season. Granted, they didn't tank outright, but it was definitely not ethical.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
what they did, they sat guys, and Luka expressed that he was very upset with it. But they
yeah.
ended up getting Derek Lively, who, for my money, is the second most important piece going forward on that team now. So they hit the draft pick, which is important. They added to the draft pick by then trading subsequent draft picks to get Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington and now Klay Thompson, which I don't agree with. So yeah, they took a momentary dip in order to take a major jump forward because they believed in the 2023 draft class having some late end lottery talent. Yeah, those are examples.
Later in the year, though, right? Like closer to the end of the year. To begin
That's
the
the
year,
distinction.
they were playing well,
Look,
right?
that's the distinction,
Yeah,
and you have to draw that distinction for sure. Because look, in the summer, if you remember, Vince called in. I don't know if you watched that episode where Vince called in and he was like, "Rob, this draft coming up, it's great. We got a tank for this." And I was like, "No, not yet. We cannot have this conversation right now. I cannot, in good consciousness, as a Raptor fan, as a person who wants this team to do well and be a good team long term. Because if we're not rooting for a potential championship, what are we rooting for, right?" I cannot, in good conscience, be rooting for that and to try to put into the ether or onto the internet, we need to be bad this year because we're not good enough to compete with the players that we have, because that's very dispiriting to the players that we have.
yeah,
And I know a lot of them do see our stuff. They see everything. That's the crazy thing. Like, I know a lot of players, and what Scotty said, like, hey, like Pensar basketball, there's always shouting us out. I feel the support. Yeah, we were supporting him when everyone was down on him, though. And it's the same thing with Ulrich right now. We're not supporting him when he becomes a full-time starter in the NBA. We're supporting him when he's in the G League. And that support is important because I think it's like sometimes you look around the G League and there's like 800 people in the stands and you're sitting at the end of the bench and you can start to feel a little bit lost.
yeah.
As like, is what I'm doing even mattering? I'm not on Sports Center. I'm not on ESPN. Is what I'm doing counting? Is someone seeing it? And I want to make sure that Jamal Shed and Jonathan Mobo and Ulrich, these people are seen. So I bring them up as often as I
Mm,
can on the panel. I'll make videos about them. I'll devote an entire scouting session to them. Is largely because I want them to know that what they're doing is it matters. It matters to
yeah,
us as a fan base, because it's also countering the JD Bunkuses of the world.
yeah, yeah. What's your thoughts on? I know. I mean, you said you saw the podcast. JD saying, and this stuck in my head, that he does not think, there's no doubt in his mind that Scotty Barnes will not be the best player on a championship team.
Mhm.
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't. What's crazy? So I didn't listen to the full podcast, clearly. I
Okay.
listened to 4 minutes of it,
Yeah.
and I was expecting to be mad. And I think I listened to it from 5 minutes to 9 minutes, and then I just didn't. I tuned out.
Yeah. So
So
he went on to say that, and then he said
did Blake agree?
no.
Did he push back?
I don't think he pushed back, but he didn't agree.
Mm.
So I think he just stayed silent because Bunkus went on to say that for that reason, the tank makes so much sense because he sees that with a Cooper flag. Cooper flag could come in and can completely change the face of this team and bring them into contention and ultimately lead this team one day. So yeah, I think that just
Mhm.
stuck with me. I don't know
Okay.
why it is. I don't know why he sees that. I don't know what his reason for it. Like, it would have been good for him to explain why he said that. It just doesn't really gel with me because we have all seen, this community has all seen what Scotty Barnes does and how much he impacts the game. And he doesn't have to be the top scorer to change a game. Case in point, the fourth quarter of last 5 minutes of yesterday's game. It's just the little things that he does. It's the way that he operates, the way that he dissects the game. Um, Whether or not he can be the best player on a championship team is still yet to be seen. But for someone to just completely write that off now, I think is a bit unfair.
Okay, here I have a question for you. Okay. How many full games of Cooper Flag do you think JD Bunkus has watched?
Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. I don't see him as a full NBA head, like seeing and dissecting and researching the game like to a thoroughness that some of these other podcasters that I listen to do, in my opinion. I think he just comes in and gives his 2 cents and, observes from like a out of the
Yeah.
box sort of view.
Yeah. Okay. Just
So
address
I would say
something.
no. I would
Let me
say
just
0.
give me 1 second to address something in the chat. Mark Cube is losing his mind because I said that Derek Lively is probably the second best building block for the future in Dallas. I am not saying that Derek Lively is a better player right now than Kyrie Irving. I am not saying that he's going to be a better player next year or the year after. I am saying that when you are building around a 24-year-old superstar, the 20-year-old center is a bigger part of your next 10-year window than your 31-year-old point guard. Okay. Please stop crashing out. If you would like to unsubscribe, please unsubscribe. I did not say I am not a Kyrie hater. I actually support Kyrie more than you can ever imagine. And if you want my takes on this, go listen to the panel. Okay. Now, enough of this. Please stop hijacking the chat and losing your mind. Okay. For fuck's sake, man. I hate when people do this where they're just like, they have to spam their point across and there's like 800 comments by them. It's like, oh, I'm done. I'm done. Like, stop. Okay. Now, what were you saying?
I don't know how you can do that though. Like how you can just read comments as well as concentrate
Listening
on
to
your
you?
thoughts. Yeah,
It is difficult. Okay, so to the point of what JD Bunk has said, and Blake Murphy not necessarily pushing back, but not it's ironic, with Blake, how whether it was on the Raptor show with Willu like last year and the year before, especially the year before, where as you recall, I called out Will and Blake ended up coming on to the live and we had a lively discussion.
Mhm.
It's never really Blake leading the charge of the stupid conversation. He just unfortunately ends up in the same studio as the stupid conversation every time. And I specifically referenced JD Bunkus 2 years ago as the podcast where this whole Scotty Barnes work ethic issue crap even started. I think it's clear to me that JD Bunkus simply does not see the future on Scotty Barnes. And he's not even the person who hates him the most. I think the guy who hates him the most is Bob McCallum. The way Bob McCallum talks about Scotty Barnes, you might just think it's me out there that they're trying to make a superstar. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't think so. And it's like, I don't understand how you can write off a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old at the time. I think part of it is just a massive anchoring bias to how he was covered as a draft prospect. The fact that he was considered a 0-level scorer by people really trusted. They can't shake. It's like, let me put it this way. It's like if I knew that you were, the first thing I found out about you was that you're a convicted felon, right? And now I meet you with the knowledge that you're a convicted felon. How many years of good behavior do I have to witness from you to get over my first trepidation about trusting you with my children? Or trusting you with my wife, or trusting you in my house by yourself, right? How do you disprove the negative? Like, that's the thing, right? If the charge is like with Cooper Flag, all these people hyping Cooper Flag right now have not watched a single game of him play. I would bet bottom dollar on that. They're too lazy. Their takes are too lazy. They wouldn't take the time to watch a 2-hour, Duke game right now. So they're watching the highlights. They're reading the analysis. They're like, this is the big thing. And they're like, well, that's the big thing. Okay, cool. But what if Cooper comes out and what they're not realizing is that Cooper's most favorable NBA draft comparison is Scotty Barnes. Make that make sense, So it's like Cooper's great. I would love Cooper Flag on this team, 100%. But I'm not writing off Scotty Barnes in order to hype up Cooper Flag. I think they could play together. I think this team needs talent, whatever. Those are separate conversations. But the fact is that these people simply do not believe in Scotty as a franchise player. And they believe that the Raptors internally have made this really major mistake building their team around a player who's basically a glorified role player. And I think that's the general consensus. And I think there's more that is being said about Emmanuel Quickly as like they took a backup guard and they paid him $32 million. At what point does Emmanuel Quickly beat the allegation that it's just a backup guard? At what point does Scotty Barnes beat the allegation that He's just a glorified role player. Apparently, being an all-star at the age of 22 didn't do it. So what does he have to do?
Get past the first round.
Is that the bar? Did Chris Bosh ever get past the first round?
I would say that helps the case for people to start believing in him.
There were fans, Raptor fans, chanting MVP for Chris Bosh. He won 3 playoff games. Scotty's won 2 already.
I don't know. That's some.
Chris Bosh in 7 years won 3 playoff games. Scotty Barnes won 2 in his rookie season. Chris Bosh never won Rookie of the Year. Scotty won Rookie of the Year. Chris Bosh was an All-Star at 23. Scotty Barnes was okay. So why were
we have a more educated fan base now? I think with Raptors fans knowing the game a lot better than they did back then. They just saw somebody who had some highlights and was the best player on the team at the time and had someone to root for, because we didn't have much to root for back then. So for them to be chanting MVP after 3 playoff games, like it's a much higher standard now within the Raptors fan base. I'd say
so.
100%. Yeah,
I think, and this might be wrong, but I think that there's a lot of delusional confidence right now among the Raptor fan base in terms of how much they actually think they know. I think it's perfectly possible to be successful and have no idea how you were successful. I think that's possible. I think it's perfectly possible that this fan base might be massively over. I think they might be running away from what they thought. There were a lot of fans who were very, very upset that the Raptors traded Jonas Valanciunas for Marc Gasol. There were a lot of fans who were upset that DeMar DeRozan was traded for a disgruntled Kawhi Leonard. There were a lot of fans who were disgruntled that the Raptors traded away fan favorite Terrence Ross for an older Serge Ibaka. There were a lot of fans who believed that DeMar DeRozan should have been traded in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. There were a lot of fans who called for this thing to be absolutely blown up when they lost to the Washington Wizards in the first round.
There was a lot of fans calling for DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry to be traded after we saw year after year of them failing in the playoffs.
Oh, you mean Kyle Lowry, the choker, the notorious playoff choker who never shows up big? Kyle Lowry, who'll never be a starting point guard on a championship team? Yeah, that Kyle Lowry. I remember that.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, the people who are wrong, consistently wrong, which is the Toronto media as well, which is a lot of these analysts, were consistently wrong. The people who are wrong, like my biggest beef with this take culture and what we do, sports analysis, is that I just want people to be held accountable when they're wrong. Why is this the one place where people can be wrong all the goddamn time? Like I said prior to the season that I thought the San Antonio Spurs were going to be better than expected. I'm right. I said the Houston Rockets were going to be better than expected. I'm right. I said the Raptors were going to be better than expected, and I'm goddamn right. But I also said the Sixers would be better, and I am damn wrong. I take the L, right? I think everyone needs to, because if we never, ever own up to what we said in the first place, we'll never learn from it, right? So there has to be some talk about that. Like a lot of these people that are saying tank for Cooper Flag, whatever, are the same people who were saying trade DeMar DeRozan, tank, blow this thing up. But the Raptors won championships, so now they get to walk away from every trade this guy, trade that guy. They get to reinvent, conveniently have selective amnesia about what they said, and now act like, see, I knew DeMar needed to be traded for Kawhi Leonard.
I think we've had one too many seasons since the championship of utter disappointment. Just failure after failure. I mean, when people are in this stage of the Raptors' lifespan where we're kind of sucking, and last year was a dud, and the year before that was a dud, there's no other choice but to think we got to do something crazy to try and fix this. And the crazy is tanking for an ultimately the next generation of a player in Cooper Flag. So the thought process, I think, is we gotta shift away from the bad and start looking at the good. And the only way we can get into the good is to get this guy. But I think what changes that is a successful season. we haven't had a successful season. We haven't been out of the first round since 2020 season. I think it was after the
Wouldn't you
championship run.
consider Scotty's rookie season a successful season? 48 wins.
I
You
would,
lose Fred VanVleet. Okay.
but how how would you how would you feel it if you asked that to 100 other Raptors fans?
I think
Is
if I
that a
explained to them the
successful season?
concept,
Yeah,
I think if I explained to them the concept that you had a very depleted bench
yeah,
and that you started a rookie to that one rookie of the year and you pushed a title favorite, which was Philadelphia that year, one of the 6 title favorites to a 6 games without you starting point guard. Yeah, I would say that's a very successful year, but
me too.
maybe we would get a 50-50 split on that. I think
Yeah,
what's not disagreeable, what's not up for debate is that last year with all the blowouts, the losses, losing your lottery pick felt like a kick to the nuts. In the previous year, which was 41-41 and getting bounced in the play-in, also felt
mhm.
like a kick to the nuts, given Scotty struggled as much as he did, given the fact that the season concluded with you losing Fred VanVleet for nothing. So I don't know, man. It takes a lot of imagination. I think like the reason that these GMs that get paid like, 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 million dollars to do their job and they're not sitting on a couch somewhere just, talking about sports, right? Is because they have a special vision and that vision is refined through data and analysis, numbers, specific skill, maybe a gift to see the game, to see beyond, to be able to look at a 20-year-old, Kawhi Leonard at San Diego in San Diego State and just see him as more, to be able to see a raw 17, 18-year-old like a Tracy McGrady and to see him as more, to be able to see a relatively raw Pascal Siakam and to be able to project him as more, when Kawhi left, I think what a lot of fans forget is that most people wanted us to tank. A lot of people said tank. I don't want to say most, but a lot of people said, okay, Kawhi left, it's over. And the Raptors went out and they won. They were on pace to win more games when Kawhi left. So
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So like you have a successful season that changes the whole narrative. People were probably on board when that team won in the championship with Kawhi. I think we were all guilty of thinking Kawhi won it for us. But then it
Mhm.
took that season following the championship to realize actually we had Kyle Lowry, we had Marc Gasol, we had Danny Green, we had the best bench mob in the NBA. There was an effort that was spread across the entire team that made that work. It wasn't one guy that took us to the championship. And I think some of the American media still think that. I don't think they think that. I know they think that. They still believe that Kawhi Leonard, without Kawhi Leonard, we wouldn't have gotten as far as we got, and that he carried the team.
well, they're right, but
So they're
they're
right,
right.
but it's
They're right to say we wouldn't have gotten as far as we got without
but
Kawhi.
no one else
But,
gets their
but that
flowers.
could be said. But right, that can literally be said about Mark and Kyle, right, and Pascal. Like
Yeah.
there was real core there, and I hope. Oh wow, two tone with super chat here, double super chat. Cool. Wait, am I blind? No. Walter Shed Mobo 905 signed tonight. What?
That's sick.
Oh,
I
you
heard the
better
whole team. The
believe
whole
we're
team is
all
going down
tuning
to
up.
watch that. By the way,
Yeah, no, I heard. This is so cool. Okay, Walter Shed. Yo, the 905 game. I might be more excited about the
can
905
be lit.
game tonight than I was about the Raptors game last night.
Can you watch that live? By the way,
Yes, you can.
I mean I can't, but you can watch it live. Yeah. Okay.
Do you have Tubi?
No.
Okay, you need a VPN. Get a VPN, and then you can watch it live. And just go to the Raptors 905 and just click on the thing, and it says "Watch Live," and you'll be able to watch it because it's available in Canada on YouTube,
Yeah.
and I think it's on Tubi TV in other countries. There's 100% a way for you to watch it. I hope you do watch it. I hope you get a chance to watch it. If you don't watch it, we're gonna do a film breakdown so you can watch it tomorrow, like via
Yeah. We can.
us selective clips and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
Uh,
man, thanks for calling in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, no worries. One last thing is
Go ahead.
let's all take a moment to just respect what Darko has done for this team. Like,
Yes, sir.
unbelievable. He's making everybody better. And
I agree with you.
would Scotty Barnes be Scotty Barnes if he got drafted by the Orlando Magic instead of the Raptors? Would he be the same player?
He'd be a
It's not.
different player.
He'd be a different player. I think
He
it
might be a
has
better player. He might have been a worse player. I'll have no idea. The Orlando Magic are certainly not doing a bad job of developing. I'll tell you that. They've developed the shit out of Jalen Suggs, given where he started. I think he might have been a better player.
a better
I
player
think,
than what he is right now.
yeah. So I think, okay, so
Interesting.
this is just my sort of like crazy. I've thought about this many times. If Scotty ended up in Orlando, OKC, or Toronto, because those are the three teams, they all wanted him really badly. All of them. That's what people don't know. Like I've
What
talked
three
to people
teams? Sorry,
behind.
OKC, Toronto, and Orlando.
Mhm. All three really desperately wanted him. And it's ironic that the Raptors got to 4 because the
Yeah.
Raptors were supposed to pick behind a couple of those teams, right? And they bumped them to get them. There's no way Scotty fell to number 5 or number 6 or number 7 ever. So
Mhm.
I think Golden State actually wanted him as well. So there's basically the 4 teams behind you, 3 teams behind you, all wanted Scotty Barnes. And that's where the consensus Jalen Suggs was the consensus number 4 pick just never made sense to me ever. Because
Mhm.
OKC, if they were 4th, would have picked Scotty. Orlando would have picked Scotty. San Antonio would have picked Scotty. Golden State would have picked Scotty over Suggs. So yeah, it doesn't matter to me that the Lakers would have picked Jalen Suggs. I don't give a shit what the Lakers would have done. It's the teams that were in contention there would have picked Scotty. And among those outcomes, I do believe that the Raptors are probably the lowest outcome for him. And I say that because I believe that the first 2 years of his development were kind of screwed up with Nick Nurse.
With Nick Nurse.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Orlando has done a better job. Look, if I take Scotty at draft, okay, Scotty on game 1 of his rookie season versus Franz game 1 rookie season, Alperen Şengün game 1 rookie season, Jalen Suggs game 1 rookie season, etc. And then I draw a line and say how far did they come from game 1 till today? I would say Scotty's lagging behind.
Lagging behind.
Because I think he started ahead of those guys.
Mm.
And now he's like almost on par with those guys to some extent. So
Mm.
hopefully now that Darko has taken over, we correct the trend. But I think in a different world that Scotty should have been like a superstar by now. And maybe he would have been with Orlando or OKC.
Something you said. Sorry, something you said. I think like last year or something, where when we were struggling slightly, was that Darko, for everything that he is, he may be just a developmental like not say I don't want to say that in a bad way, but he may just be what the Raptors have brought in to develop the team. Following that, when they become contenders, they might look at a different coach. Like they might look at other options, but he's done his job basically, and now it's time to get a champion. Because I think you were talking about Nick Nurse and the comparison to Darko, and how Nick Nurse is a championship coach. Like he can coach a championship team, but he can't coach a developing team, and
I
that's what
think
Darko excels at.
I think no, I don't think I
I
would
don't know
necessarily
if
say that.
I'm yeah
No, I think what I was saying was that if the culture is already established, right? Like let's say for instance right now, Boston's DNA is already established. They are who they are as a team, and they are largely who they are as a team because of Brad Stevens, Ime Udoka, and also Joe Mazzulla. So 3 coaches over the last 6 years have really punched their DNA into those players, punched habits, culture, etc., organizational norms, right? How are practices Boston? It has been determined by those 3 men. So now if Nick Nurse was to go to Boston, I have no doubt he can win a championship with that team. He would take something that's already been built and
yeah
tinker with it,
yeah
right?
okay.
It,
Mhm.
but if he went right now to Utah, a team with young players, a franchise type of all-star in Lauri Markkanen, some competitive, pieces, and you said go build a championship contender in the next 5 years, he would fail miserably. That's my point. He can't
Mhm.
build it from this. He can't build it from scratch.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I said. He's not a developmental coach.
Right. But
Yeah.
then the question
Whereas
then becomes
Darko is.
like,
Yeah.
right. But Darko is malleable. Like, Darko is flexible. Like, I think Darko can be a championship coach or a
I
good
think so
playoff
too.
coach.
I think so
Yeah.
too. It's not what you said though. I'm just saying it's like you didn't get to that point, but I wanted to bring it back up because I think that there is probably a belief now that he can elevate to that level. He's a second year coach that's working on his style still. But if he stays with this team long enough and he brings them out of that development stage, I think he can certainly be a championship or a contender coach. There's no reason
I
for us to
agree
move
with
on
you.
from him to bring in someone else if we don't make it to the next level. Is all I'm saying. He
I
looked
think it
long
comes
term,
down.
basically.
Yeah, like I think it comes down to just basically giving it a chance. Like everyone has to be given a fair chance because you need to see it through. You
Yeah.
need to be able to justify the moves logically to your team. If Darko is given a chance in the playoffs and he fails in the first stint, it will be excused. If Darko goes into the playoffs the second year and he fails in the exact same way, it will not be excused. And
Mhm.
now the door is open to being fired. What will not happen is that the Raptors get really good, they fail, one time in the playoffs, and then Darko is immediately cut. That's not how this organization has ever worked. And you know what? Like, I see a lot of trash organizations around the league. One that comes to mind is Milwaukee. You
I
know,
knew you were gonna say. I knew you were gonna say Milwaukee.
Philly as
Oh,
well. Like, I just don't like how these teams operate. I don't like how they
yeah.
treat their players. I don't like how they treat their coaches. I don't like how they treat anything. So for me personally, one of my happiest things about being a Raptor fan, apart from the fact that, my favorite player plays on this team, is Scotty Barnes, is that I genuinely never have to worry that our organization is about to do one of these players dirty,
Mhm.
lie to them, manipulate them, send them to a horrible situation, deliberately asking them to sit out to tank their value, trying to stiff them on a contract. Never have to worry about that, you
Mhm.
know? And that's the ethical side of it, that
Yep.
agents trust the Raptors. And when agents are pushing their clients in the draft workouts towards Toronto, it's because they know that their client will develop and their client will be paid. These things are super important long term in terms of establishing these understandings around the league. When the Milwaukee Bucks traded Drew Holiday said, "I was blindsided by it. I literally found out on ESPN." That is
Mhm.
a death note to the Milwaukee Bucks front office. Every agent, every player literally just boycotted that team and said, "Nope, we will not trust this team for the next 10 years."
Mhm.
And again, that's going to be the case if you fire Darko Rajakovic after one playoff loss. Now, how do you go to the next coach and say, "Trust us, we won't do the same thing to you"?
Mhm. Yep.
That's the
Yeah. Good
ethical
point.
side of it. And you have to operate above the belt. And there is a process. Like, people are very results based, and I often argue very process based. The earlier point, I don't know if you caught the beginning of the live, where I said goal is not a championship. Goal is 25% chance to win a championship for as long a period of time as possible. That's always the goal, right? Like, get to the table, have a seat at the table, and stay at the table long enough for the cards to flip your way.
Mhm.
And maybe if you're the Chicago Bulls in the 90s, you have much more than a 25% chance every year. But even the Chicago Bulls did not have a 100% chance of winning the championship every single year. The
Mhm.
fact that they kept rolling doubles or kept rolling snake eyes, it was a remarkable coincidence. Maybe they rigged the deck a little bit because Michael Jordan was just that damn good. Um,
Mhm.
but like, look at the San Antonio Spurs. Some people debate whether they're a dynasty because they never won back to back. Or
Mhm.
did they win a back to back? Did they win 2002, 2003 back to back? I don't remember. But hold on. They won five. They never three-peated. Let's just say that. They didn't
Yeah.
three-peat. The Golden State Warriors didn't three-peat either. Are those not dynasties though? They're
Yeah.
at the
For sure.
table for like 10 years, man.
Mhm.
Like, they've done it with like
I know.
very successful. You know what I mean? Like, even the
Yeah.
Dallas Mavericks, right? They're not a dynasty, but they got to the finals twice. And it was like 3-4 years apart that they got to the finals, right? The New Jersey Nets with Jason Kidd, they made it to the finals, right? They were a very competitive team. Even with Vince, the first iteration with Kenyon Martin and those guys and Kerry Kittles and the version with Vince, like that was a really competitive, fun team to watch. The 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns, they never made it to the finals. Man, they were right there. They were right there against, so like that to me, like I think about all these teams that I've followed and I think to myself, those teams had a 10% chance for like 5 years. And that's hella fun. That's a hella fun 5 years. And just because that 10% for 5 years does not result in a single championship does not mean it's an epic failure. I think that was sort of the point. So I will be happy.
Is that getting to a championship or getting into a certain level of the playoffs in your eyes?
What I broke down earlier was basically that there's a pie. Let's call it a championship. It's like a pie, right?
Yeah.
And the pie is just basically accumulated with odds. And basically, like right now, if I were to say OKC has 20 pieces of that 100-piece pie, right? And maybe Boston has 25 and Cleveland has 15. But basically, 5 teams are divvying up 99% of the odds of a championship every year. Maybe 6.
Yeah.
The year the Raptors won, there were 4 teams divvying up those odds. It was the Golden State Warriors, the Boston Celtics, the Toronto Raptors, Philadelphia 76ers, Milwaukee Bucks, and maybe one other team in the West divvying up those odds. And it was probably the Raptors had like a 16% chance to win the championship that year. If we did the Vegas odds on it, it was probably like 14 to 16%. They were supposed to lose against Golden State. They were supposed to lose against Philly. They were supposed to lose against Milwaukee. So they beat 3 teams ahead of them, which means the Raptors went into the 2018-19 playoffs with probably a 10% chance, 12% chance to win. And they beat the team in the finals due to injury luck, in part, who probably had a 38% chance to win the finals. That's the point. But the Orlando Magic that the Raptors beat in the first round, they had like probably a 0.01% chance of winning a championship. You know what I mean? So it's just like, did Milwaukee fail that year because they were up 2-0 against the Raptors and then they lost? I don't think they failed. And as Giannis, eloquently pointed out in his post game after they got dropped a couple of years ago, he said, "Is every time you don't win an award a failure?" No, but that's the process-based thinker versus the results-based thinker. The results-based thinker is, I didn't get the A, I failed. The process-based thinker says, I studied, I choked, I got a B, but because I learned from it, I succeeded. And I think the Raptors need to just put themselves in a position where they have a sizable piece of the pie every year for like 10 years. That's what you want.
And they did that. They did that with the DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry era, didn't they?
They did it for 8 years.
They always had a piece of the pie at that stage, didn't they? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because from 2014 to 2021, the Golden State Warriors were the winningest team in basketball over that 8-year stretch. Do you know the second winningest team in basketball was during that 8-year stretch?
The Raptors.
Yes, they were. The Raptors were. And that's partially because LeBron flipped from Cleveland and then he went to the Lakers during that period. But had LeBron stayed with the Cleveland Cavaliers, maybe it would have been the Raptors would have been third. But to be a top 3 team in terms of cumulative wins, even if some people are like, no, it's like there were 52 win fraud or 55 win fraud or 58 win fraud or an Eastern Conference Finals fraud. So man, be a fraud like that. Be a fraud like that, man. Those playoff games were great. So it's like the championship in a lot of ways pacified this fan base, soothed this fan base, was cathartic for this fan base, a fan base that had forever heard that, oh, we're never going to win one. The NBA will never allow it. The league is rigged. It was very cathartic, but it might have also been a bit of a curse. A little bit. Because it gave people this idea that, now we're supposed to win one every year. Or this is the only success. Yeah, because so many people came into watching the team only when they got Kawhi, right?
Yeah,
they have completely. It's almost like there's a room of Raptor fans, right? And there's like 80 people in that room that have been there since like 95,
Yeah.
And there's maybe another 80 people that have been there since like at least 98, 99. And then there was like 800 people who came in 2019. And now we have like nearly 1,000 people in this room, and consensus wins. And 80+% of that room believes that the Raptors' history started with a championship and ended with a championship. And the rest of us believe that's not what happened. And it's just a constant war, right? And casuals like JD Bungus and people like that, he says he watches Raptor games. He says, "Oh, I love watching the Raptors. They're fun. They're this, they're that." Cap. There's no way that dude watches full Raptor games.
Yeah, he shits on
If he,
everybody, bro. He shits on quickly as well, saying that he's overpaid. I mean, I almost just like listening to him just for the laugh.
I think, I would say this. We rose, you mentioned 11,500 subscribers. I would say the biggest jump in our channel was when we were being positive, and then there was this long period of time when we were being pretty negative about this team, and a lot of people just want me to shut up. And I said, if I'm being negative and you want me to shut up, stop commenting. You're helping the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
If it's like, we vote with our time in the internet age, right? If I take the time to write out an 8-paragraph response or make a video why JD Bunkus is an asshole, even though I've probably given him already way too much attention by bringing it up 6 times in this live, then I'm just feeding future JD Bunkuses and people like JD Bunkus who like to rage bait, right? But if I decide JD Bunk is not worth my time, which is exactly what I did when I clicked away from my video 4 minutes in, because I was like, I'm not going to learn anything from this. Why is this worth my valuable resources, man? Life is so short. Life is so goddamn short. I mean, we're roughly the same age. I think we established the last time. Like I'm closing in on 37 right now, and really close, like 4 days away. And I'm like,
Really?
yeah.
My birthday's tomorrow.
Oh shit,
So,
we're both Sagittarius.
yeah.
Dope. Okay, well, happy
Yeah.
early birthday to
Thanks,
you,
man.
friend.
And you too.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about this, and I just realized, how many people do I know that died at 40, 44, 48? How many people do I know that died under 50? My dad died. My dad died at 44. My mom died at 50. I'm closing in on being almost as old as my parents when they passed away. I can't be wasting my life listening to JD fucking Bunkus, is my point.
Monkeys.
I cannot waste that little amount of time that I have left on this earth that could
I
be
know what you
put to
mean.
where something productive than commenting back and forth with people. There's a dude, Marcus Aurelius, who has been commenting nonsense on our Twitter posts for close to 4 days. I will look at one Twitter post that we have, and there's 12 replies, and I'll go to read them, and they're all this guy just talking to himself. Now, the second I take time to engage with this, I'm wasting my life, because I don't think none of it makes sense. So it's just like, okay, let's just, let's move on. So I just want to spend my time doing productive shit. Started the fourth quarter gang here.
Like that.
Closing
I
out
like
the year.
that. Yeah.
You heard of the fourth quarter gang?
I heard about it, yeah.
Official member?
Of course.
Okay, sweet, man. Let's do it.
100%.
Let's and yeah. So I don't know. I appreciate that I myself have called out people like Doug Smith and people like, I've even called out Blake. Shit, Blake and I are cool now, but like I've called out Blake, I've called out Will Lou, I've called out all these people in the past. I've called out Aaron Rose multiple times over the last week for his questions. I called out Doug Smith last night. So I understand I've called out all these people. I want them to be better, but I don't think they're going to change. They are who they are at this point. So I got to just focus on us. And in this community, I would love for us to just be, I don't want to say positive. I want us to be realistic. I want us to be real.
Yeah.
Balanced.
We don't want to fluff it up and just make everything positive. This is the reason why we listen, is we want to hear the real stuff. We want to hear what's not going right. We want to see the film breakdown. We want to see where the blunders are happening. Things that you can point out to us that we don't actually see the first time around. I'm speaking for myself, but I think that's how a lot of us feel. So we appreciate what you do.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you calling in and saying that. And I think that, I remember watching a particular Raptors podcast, but I'll not name who it is. And this was 2 years ago when things were not going well with the team culture. And someone brought up in the chat to this particular podcaster that things are not going well and maybe they need to fire Nick Nurse. And this podcaster went off. They're like, hey, you won a championship. How can you talk about that? Nick Nurse, the best coach ever. Pascal Siakam's great. You need to go over to Pensar basketball because that's a toxic fan base that wants to, doesn't appreciate championships. But the same person in the same word was basically saying Kawhi Leonard was a bum for leaving and that he was an asshole and all this stuff. So I never want to become that. I think I got a view into the absolute extreme of both ends with Bob McCowan and this unnamed podcaster. And I was like, okay, stay away from those. Don't ever become so vehemently toxic and negative towards the team that is hard to listen to and honestly, induces vomit. But also don't become so positive that you are completely unwilling to hear any critical examination of the players. I'm willing to hear people who think Scotty's not going to be the first option. I'm not going to probably agree with you because I believe that the research would indicate otherwise, but we can have the conversation. We can, if Scotty and the Raptors fail in the first round and Scotty, shoots 18% from the field and RJ shoots 20% from the field, yeah, we can have some different conversations about it at that time. It's never going to be like positivity, like toxic positivity. I think like that's what I'm kind of noticing in the political sphere, not only in the UK where you are, but also like here and in America, is like shutting down conversations has never led to anything productive. It just leads to more sort of insulated societies that just create larger echo chambers. And we need to be the place where left and right can unite, and have a conversation in fairness. And that's why I clipped away 3 hours of that live last night, in which, is Jason and I just got into a back and forth about it, because I was just like, this is not conducive to creating more conversations in the future. This is the type of thing that's going to make people literally afraid to call in and disagree with something I have to say. And that's not good for, our community or any community for that matter. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Anyways, man, thanks a lot for calling in, and I wish
No
you a very,
worries.
very happy birthday. And
You too.
what are you doing for your birthday?
Just having some family over. I have some cousins that live in the UK as well, so they're just coming over, and we're gonna have some lunch. I'm cooking them all chicken wings.
Dope, man. Chicken wings are the best. All right, man. Appreciate you. Have a blessed birthday and more life to you.
Yes, brother. Peace out.
Peace. All right. I always love hearing from Rock UK. Like, I remember first time he called in, I was just like, yo, I would co-host the show with this dude if I could. It was great. Anyways, thank you guys. Andrew saying, W caller, W fake Halliburton. Why does Rock UK get fake Halliburton charges every time he calls in? I swear to God, people say he looks like Tyrese Halliburton. Anyways, it was a great conversation. I'm glad we were able to have particular conversations with callers, some who agreed, some who didn't agree, and that's cool. In the chat, in the comments, all we've been going for 3 hours strong. We basically did the panel by ourselves. That's crazy. Summerlow saying, Rob, if one was to want to contact you privately, does the email in the description work? Yes, it does. Yeah, the same email that works for the e-transfers is the same email that works for communication. Some people reach out. In fact, we actually have an e-transfer to read out. Hold on. Let me just read this one out. E-transfer from... Where are we? Sorry, hold on. Give me 1 sec here. I'll pull this up. E-transfer is from Pascal. Thank you for your e-transfer here. $20 e-transfer. Thank you very much. Said, Rob, keep up good work. Thanks for the lives. Keep going. Thank you. Appreciate it. As always, thank you. So, unless Scotty starts scoring more than RJ, casuals will never stop. Well, the casuals don't have to stop. It's okay. You have two really good players. Keep it at that. We don't need to turn every good RJ game into Scotty versus RJ. We don't need to turn every bad RJ game into trade RJ. I don't know where this toxicity comes from, but there's more to life than ripping your own team and trying to trade everyone away. Okay, but you fan how you want to fan. I hope this has been a pretty good dose of reality, and I hope that it wasn't too rambly. I'll catch you guys later. I got you covered tonight after the 9 to 5 game. It's going to be a dope post game. We're going to break down some film. We're going to look at the film. It's going to be 30 minutes to 40 minutes after the game ends. So bear with me as I put clips together, but it'll be a fun watch. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. Okay. And yes, Rock UK, happy birthday UK, and that's fine. Happy birthday UK and Raw. Okay. So Vegan Grassy and Scotty dressing like Dexter tonight. Cool. All right. Talk to you guys later. And Jason Williams saying Tubi is the only place to watch the game. It's not. Unless okay, so you can definitely watch the game on YouTube. I'm 95% sure you can watch the game on YouTube. If you can't watch the game on YouTube, then get a VPN. We're not sponsored by any VPNs, but yeah, get a VPN. Just Stewart saying enjoy a full 905 roster, gonna be good. Absolutely. And again, this two-tone super hot. Walter, Shed, Mobo, 905 assigned tonight, joining Ulrich. That's going to be fun. I wonder who goes to the bench. I wonder who starts. I'm going to guess that Jamal starts and maybe next to. I would really hope Jamal starts ahead of Kennedy Chandler, man. I haven't loved Kennedy Chandler so far in the G League, so I hope Jamal starts. But yeah, don't expect a win or anything like that, but expect like some really interesting. I'll be very curious to see what Jacoby does against like non-NBA players, but are still pros. Yeah, no overreactions, of course, but just it'll be interesting to see. Ash saying, what time is the game? The game is at 7:30, if I'm not mistaken. The game is at 7:30. Our post-game live will be at 10 o'clock. So I have you guys covered, and I can't wait. I'm super stoked. I would be going to the game myself if I was not doing the post-game. So yeah. Devon saying, what time 9 to 5 game? As I said, 7:30. Key M with the expert response G League website. All right, talk to you guys later. And thank you again. Super chats, Motaz Musa, Recruiter Dude, as always, Nadeem C, as always, and Two Tone, as always. Thank you guys. Enjoy your day. Talk to you later. Bye.